You betcha. You betcha.
Good evening, and welcome to the Norfolk Board of Selectmen's meeting of September 18th. My name is Jim Lehan. To my right is my associate, Mr. Palumbo. To my left, my associate, Mr. Calcutt. Mr. Jack Hathaway, our town administrator. Susan Jacobson, our super-duper executive assistant. And we also have with us Mr. Dave DeLuca. I want to remind everybody that this meeting is being both audio and videotaped in accordance with Mass General Law and the opening meeting laws. We are going to be going into executive session at the beginning of this meeting. I would anticipate it to be no more than 15 or 20 minutes with Mr. DeLuca. The purpose of that is litigation pending regarding run and gun. But before we do that, gentlemen, if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
You can stand too, sir.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. So, may I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Want to invite Chuck up to the table? No, just say who was.
Good evening and welcome back to the Norfolk Board of Selectmen's meeting. We are now back in public session, and if the cameras can show this, we are all under arrest. Or confined to the house, I'm not sure which. But this is probably one of the special things that we as board members get to do, which is to say thank you to those that serve this community. Public safety officials in this town are second to none. We have the best, and we're just, to say proud doesn't do justice. We're grateful for all you do in keeping us safe and keeping us healthy. It is commendable, and we're very, very grateful for that. And tonight is even a little bit more special. Chief Stone is with us. We have 3 exciting opportunities to welcome a new officer full-time to the force and 2 promotions to present. Chief, would you take the lead, please, sir?
Well, we have quite a group here tonight. Bobby Shannon, Robert, was moved from sergeant to lieutenant, and I'm going to have him come up front. Do this one at a time. Would you take a minute and introduce your family?
Thank you for this opportunity. My brother Fred, where are you? Fred's my oldest brother. Jerry, my second oldest brother. Michael, and I'm sorry, all out of order. Debbie Grover, my wife. Fred's wife Betty is here as well, and Jerry's girlfriend Denise Horan is here. Michael is here with a good friend of his, Marina, and that's about all I have to say.
Don't go away.
So the chief's going to pin me this evening?
Stand up. Let's start.
Growing up in town, I knew the chief, I admired the chief and some of the other older officers that were in town, and the chief was very instrumental in me becoming the man that I am today. He guided me through some of my teenage years and into the police department. Told me to continue pursuing my education and to get braces and help make me the man I am today. So in lieu of my father, any of my other family members, I asked the chief to pin me this evening.
Bobby, Lieutenant, back.
Thank you, Kevin.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done.
I'm going to miss you. Thank you. Thank you.
Next, we have Eric Van Ness. Now, he was appointed July 28th, also like Lieutenant Shannon. He is with a large contingent of his family. And rather than not do justice, I'm going to have Eric take a minute and try to introduce his whole family.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Board. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you all for coming here this evening. I'm going to start with my wife, Heather. Heather is a Walpole police officer, as you can see. Our children, Braden, Talon, and Jared, who's in the back. My mother and father are here, Bob, Anne-Marie, and my sister, her husband, and my oldest brother, Chris. Chris is a Yarmouth police officer, and all the kids, my brother's girlfriend, Kristen, my sister, Kara, Donnie. The whole family is here tonight, so I'd like to thank them for coming. And my mother-in-law, Jane Ann. Where is Jane Ann? Right there. Thank you, Jane Ann. So Heather and the kids are going to come up and pin me.
Terrific.
And my brother, Chris. Come on, Chris.
Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you very much. Chris.
Officially swear you in. Could you raise your right hand? Do you, Robert Shannon, solemnly swear and affirm that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a lieutenant with the Norfolk Police Department to the best of your ability and according to the laws and Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the bylaws of the town of Norfolk, so help you God?
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Eric? Raise your right hand. Do you, Eric Van Ness, solemnly swear and affirm that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a sergeant with the Norfolk Police Department to the best of your ability and according to the laws and Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the bylaws of the town of Norfolk, so help you God?
I do.
Congratulations.
Chief, do you have one more?
No.
Nope, okay. Officer is not here. Sam Webb? Okay.
All right, thank you very much. You want to take a 5-minute?
Absolutely. Hugs and kisses all around.
Congratulations.
Gentlemen, congratulations. Take a minute. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. Thank you. Not so much. Move behind the desk. Can't give up patrol. You will. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you. I saw it. Good. Okay, then. No.
Thank you, sir. Wasn't it at all. After I said, you were a little direct on that, and you didn't mean it that way, and I apologize. One of the great pleasures you will have if you keep doing this for a long time is to get to know all these guys.
Yeah.
They are, the town has no idea how they get done.
Yeah.
Come on, Lieutenant, you're in charge. You're the senior officer here now.
So, folks, we're all going down to Nevada's on Dedham Street. You're all welcome to attend the shift. Everybody.
Oh, let's go, guys. Adjourn the meeting.
Chicken palm, salad, pasta.
Those bars have gone right to his head.
Wow. That's pretty neat. How often do we have one of these ceremonies?
Rare. We'll recognize a new officer. In fact, I thought Sam Webb was going to be here tonight as well. But, we don't have promotions. Probably. I mean, it's a pretty consistent, steady crew. It's a treat.
Yeah.
First, before we go here tonight,
A detective playing
Yeah.
those detectives.
because we've got people,
Yeah.
and this we can blitz through.
Hi. Very nice to meet you. No thanks required. We're the ones that say thank you.
Absolutely.
We are the
Congratulations.
We are the ones that are grateful.
Congratulations.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well.
Thank you. Actually, great young man.
Yes, have a glass of wine on us tonight.
And we're new to Norfolk. We just moved from Norfolk.
Oh, welcome.
Very nice.
Great to have you.
My daughter's son-in-law.
Nice to have you with us.
We're in town.
Good.
Very
Welcome.
nice.
Well, welcome
Thank
to
you.
Norfolk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your evening.
Welcome. Jim, you want to try and do
Sure,
obviously Highland Lake?
sure.
But maybe after that we can do Anthony's public records thing and get him
Okay.
on there too.
All right, good evening and welcome back. I took a little longer than we expected, but every minute was well worth it. We are very privileged to have the fine police and fire departments that we have in this town. We did not read the agenda at the beginning of the meeting, but we're going to move it around a little bit and accommodate some folks that are here now. So we will go right to the Highland Lake agenda. And Barbara, did you request to get on, or?
No, Arthur was going to do the speaking,
Okay,
but we can,
Arthur's here.
Arthur's here.
but I can see it for you. So Arthur's there.
Just so you know, in the very back of your
Let's
packet
go.
is a
Barbara's happy.
Yeah, I read that.
document from
Yep,
Barbara.
I read
I
that.
can tell you a few things that Arthur's not aware of. Since we last met, I've been in contact with multiple, and I've got some details for you. They will rent with an operator at a rate 8-hour day, minimum 1 day. They'll come and they'll cut, gather, and haul to shore. We are responsible for disposal.
Is that on, Barbara, that microphone?
I don't know.
Hello?
Yeah, it's on. All right.
Barbara, I apologize, but my wife says I'm hard of hearing, and she's right. Can you start that again?
Okay. I contacted the company, Mobitrack, about the lease, and this is the information they gave me.
This is
They
on a
will
lease? Is this on a lease, did you say?
This is the lease that we're talking about for the transfer of funds. Right, they will rent with an operator at the rate of $2,500 per day, an 8-hour day, a minimum of 1 day. They will cut, gather, and haul the weeds to shore. That's the operation. We will be responsible for the disposal of the weeds that are piled up on the shore. There is a charge for transporting the equipment and the operator to and from site, and this comes to a total of $8,000 for the transit. Right, we tried to estimate how much time. I talked with Stony Brook, and Doug Williams has the state is coming in, and they're going to clean the weeds out of the pond there in the next season, and they're allotting 1.5 days to do so. And the infestation there is about the equivalent of what we have at Highland Lake. And so, using that as a base measurement, to determine how long is this going to take. I discovered about, 3 days ago, 4 days ago, that the town owns the southern half of Bush Pond, that it was taken for taxes in 1994, and that actually its infestation is as bad or worse than that at Highland Lake. So I went back to Mobitrack and I asked them if when the equipment was here, would there be any further charge if we were to send them to 2 sites, 2 ponds? And the answer was no. That if having brought the equipment here, they would do both ponds, and the rate would remain the same, $2,500 per day, depending on how long it took to do the work. So then I went back and I did a little recalculating, and what I'm estimating is I'm saying I think we should allow approximately 5 days. All right, 5 days would come to 12,500 with transit. No, excuse me. Yeah, not without the transit. With just for the 5 days at $2,500 per day, would come to 12,500. And then if we add in the transit, this would bring the total to 20,500.
Barbara, wouldn't there be transfer from Bush Pond too, though?
No.
It's inclusive.
He said they could do two sites
Right.
for one.
But this transfer wasn't included in the work, so that one transfer would cover both ponds?
Yes, so we cover both ponds. Once they're here, they'll do both ponds, and it doesn't matter if they have to move the equipment.
The 8,000 being a sunk cost, so that we can, no matter where we move it
Okay.
in Norfolk.
Yeah, as long as it comes, in town.
Okay.
So it makes sense, if you're going to pay that much up front to get the equipment here, that for another 2 hours' work or so, we can get two for one. And the problem with Bush Pond, of course, with all this construction underway and all, there's going to be an increased likelihood that we're going to get a migration of the water chestnuts down the river, and that's going to further infest the mill pond and ultimately the Populatic area. So the more we can reduce that threat, then the better off we're going to be. We can't do much about the existing weeds there for this season. They've already bloomed and they've dropped their pods. But we can look to the next season to prevent it from recurring and try to minimize the impact that it's going to have. So what I'm saying is I think the recommendation of the 5 days, we may not need 5 days, in which case, of course, excess money would revert back. But be on the safe side, because he said, the company said that once they're here, they'll complete the job, and we can't hold them to, we want you for 3 days, or we want you for 4 days. They're doing it by one pond and the other pond. So if it takes them an extra half a day here, an extra half a day there, they expect to be paid, even though we said we want you for 4 days. So I think I'd play it safe and put the extra one in there, just to have it in case it's that long. I don't think so, because the size of the mill pond at Bush is much, much smaller, of course, than what we're dealing with Highland. But Highland is only affected around the edges, which reduces the surface area that's got to be cleaned.
So the total,
So the total we're looking to transfer would be 20,500.
May I, Jim?
Please, sir.
Just, you had mentioned operator transit, I think 800, did you say? Operator transit. So that's just for the
8,000.
8,000.
So that's for the, you say the operator, so that is the.
That's the transportation, and I suppose his transit too to get here, whether he travels with the equipment or
Okay,
separately.
so that
and
includes the equipment as well
Yeah,
as the person.
it's a package.
Just one
Right.
person operator, so, okay.
And then 2,500 a day for the
They'll be
equipment and the
using the equipment that I showed you before. The equipment with the the little amphibious duck that with the attachments on the front. So we'll also get a chance to see it work.
we also suggest that DPW
Well-
have somebody there.
Yeah, well, DPW will be able to send a man to. They'll be able to come and observe and see if it's something within their purview to work with. But according to Tom Benedetti, the operation of this equipment would come under the purview of an operator with a hydraulic operator's license, which they have on staff to run the backhoe and all in their equipment. So they already have a man on staff, and his pay rate is far less than what we're paying to a contractor. They quoted me, DPW quoted me a price of $20 to $25 an hour is his job rates. So you figure if he works a day, an 8-hour day, he's only going to pay less than $200 for his compensation, which enhances the possibility that if down the road we agree next year to buy this equipment, this makes it very feasible to rent it. Because if we own the equipment and we have a DPW operator, then the monies we could raise from renting it out to neighboring towns, et cetera, would provide a revenue stream that would pay for the maintenance and the payment of the wages for the operator so it wouldn't come out of the DPW budget. It would be like a revolving fund where we would cash the rental that would sustain the equipment, keep it maintained, and pay for its operation in season.
If I remember Mr. Frontek's presentation, so we've got to do this like 3 years in a row, right? Is because of the seeding process?
It will need to be done, yeah, every 3 years on a pond.
Okay. Oh, every 3 years.
The ultimate idea is to
So that's why we need the equipment. I mean, this is a one-year fix, which will last you a couple of years, and then the weeds will return.
Okay.
Because you're not getting down into the embedment and pulling all the roots out. You're getting some, but not all of the roots.
Yeah, it's something where we may just want to do it the first year and then see like what recurs and how much. Subsequent to our last meeting, Barbara had done the additional research that she just talked about, which I think was very helpful in terms of fleshing out level of effort and what the folks over at Stony Brook are doing and such. Did the Selectmen have any other questions about Barbara's data or the proposal, the particulars?
Gentlemen?
What they're doing over at Stony Brook, is it with the same organization?
Don't know. I haven't got back to Doug. The state's handling that through the recreation, whatever the department there that has charge of Bristol and Blake, and they're sending equipment in. Now, what the equipment they're using, I don't know. And he didn't know, so we'd have to pursue that to see if we can nail them down and see what it is they're using. I can check with Mobitrack if they're using theirs, but I doubt it, because this is a statewide effort. The state is doing this throughout various reservations and properties that they oversee. So they're setting up a program, and they're going to move from one site to another, because he said they had allotted a day and a half to take care of the situation at Stony Brook.
So their equipment is probably committed every day. They just
Right.
keep running that equipment in
That's-
different towns.
yeah.
Okay.
In terms of the timing too, I think Barbara mentioned that the pods have already dropped, so August-ish seems to be, end of August, beginning of September seems to be when our window closes. I don't know how early it opens, but we'll just mention that any machine you bring in can only get so close to the shore. This is sort of starting from the shoreline and getting into the middle. It would be great if this could be done earlier in the season rather than later, just because
They recommended spring.
it's,
Yeah,
but I mean,
late
spring means different things to different people.
May.
They'll only be able
May,
to
they
then
were
do so
saying.
much, so it's nice to know what that is earlier, so something can still be done about
And
the
this little
remainder.
machine, this machine I was speaking of, can get into water 1.5 feet deep, which means it can get, up close and personal, as well as doing the water, deeper out in the lake. And of course, like in most of these areas, Bush Pond isn't that deep, and in Highland Lake, most of the concentration of the weeds is around the periphery at the present time. So it's not out in the deeper part and up by the dam where the water's the deepest.
Well, Barbara, when you came in last time, I think we unanimously said we supported doing this and helping
Yeah.
you out. And I'd like to thank you, because last time you were in here, you mentioned that you thought it would be about $25,000, so you gave us a $4,500 discount, which we're always grateful for. The process will be, we're going to discuss the demands, if you will, the transfers that we have, and we have a lot
Yeah.
on the plate this year, later with our finance director. But in terms of, so you don't have to hang around the whole evening, I will ask the board, this is all subject to town meeting vote. You all
Right.
know that. So attend. But speaking for me, I will recommend that we support that request. And
Well, we'll
do you
try,
gentlemen
we'll
say?
try and get as much public support as we can. And
they're beautiful resources.
We're planning to put a bulletin board downstairs outside the historic office, and hopefully we may be able to put a similar display about the problem in the town ponds over in the library
Okay.
prior to the town meeting, which would help, in terms of informing. And I'll rely on the Norfolk Grantham News to
A
put
handout would
another
probably be
article.
helpful at town meeting, too, if you could do that. For the voters, when they come in, would be a good thing.
Right.
So, gentlemen,
Yeah, I'm just curious, is this problem worse than in the past? Is there a reason for it?
It
that we
has
don't-
become an epidemic, according to all I've researched, in southeastern Mass and Rhode Island, and is spreading. and it's major spread. Birds spread it. You know, they've spread the seeds, etc. It's spread by the flow of the water, where the water takes it. And what probably one of the worst offenders is by the boaters. People have put a boat in, and they take a boat out, and they put it in another body of water, and they're actually providing, the weeds are a hitchhiker that travels on the equipment, on the boat ramp, you know, on the trailer that they back into, if there's a boat ramp, on the bottom of the boat, and it moves from place to place. And it's just, it's a very invasive problem, particularly with the, right now, with the water chestnuts. There are other weeds that are a problem, but the water chestnut is just, it's epidemic where it exists. And it's puts a lifespan on a body of water, depending on its size, of 3 to 4 years before the body is overcome and unusable, because it creates a matting that the wildlife can't move through, the boats can't move through, the fish can't exist, the turtles can't exist. So, like with Highland Lake, as you saw with the history I gave you before, it will turn it back into a swamp pond. And we've
Kevin,
wasted
do
a
we
lot
have-
of town money and effort
We
in
have
terms
a
of
full
creating a
agenda,
park
so we
and
need
the
to go.
pond, if this
Do you agree?
occurs.
Support?
Absolutely.
Okay. You agree, sir?
Yes.
Support? All right, we will make that, we will go forward with that recommendation.
Okay.
Okay.
And I have that all written out if you want. If it helps.
I think we're good,
Okay.
but thank you.
Thank you very much.
Fine.
Thank you.
all.
Thank you for all of the work that you've done on this, Barbara, as you always do. She always does.
And everybody else, but I
And
know
everybody
Barbara-
else, but-
Barbara's always in charge.
Thank you all.
Do you want to just do, I know we got a bunch of people with the different agendas. I know Anthony's probably pretty quick if we want to do his public records.
Roll call.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep,
He
good
promised me
night.
he would be the fastest, so
All right,
the other people talk a lot.
we do have a full agenda here tonight.
There's anybody I could point at, really, at that comment.
Don't get the guy against the
Wasn't even
wall, we'll be
pointing at
here
you, I
all
was
night.
pointing-
Anthony, how are you?
Good.
You're here
There
to
we
talk
go.
about the highlights of the new public records law.
Yeah, I hadn't actually come before you guys before as the records access officer, so I figured it was probably about time I came and just had a quick little discussion about the law, and if you guys had any questions about how the town clerk's office and my role as record access officer works. I gave you guys a little bit of a handout just with some highlights of the law and some of the things that I've done, and as well as Carol. Basically, just as a quick overview, all government records are basically public records. There's some very few exemptions and privileged information, but in general, we should always consider all documents and communications that go on as a municipality as a public record that can be disclosed. Part of the law required actually Massachusetts had a notoriously bad public records law previous to this. And so in 2016, the legislature basically completely rewrote public records law in Massachusetts with some positives and some drawbacks from a town's perspective. We're very limited in what we can charge. Before, there weren't any strict guidelines on how towns could charge. Mainly, I would say at the state level, there were some abuses as far as doing some ridiculously high estimates on charging people to kind of keep records from the public. So I think they might have overreacted a little bit. Now we're only allowed to charge 5 cents a page for photocopies if somebody wants physical copies. We can charge, since we're under 20,000 people, we can actually charge for time spent to find records, to compile them, to put the actual effort in. Municipalities over 20,000 actually aren't allowed to charge for the first 2 hours of that labor. Luckily, we can. The max rate we can charge is $25 an hour, which if I have to refer something to the town council, he's way more expensive than that, but unfortunately the only cost we can actually pass along would be that $25. To date, I actually haven't charged many people at all. The records law really emphasizes trying to encourage people to get information from their government, and the government should be disclosing it. So in general, I haven't been charging. Everybody up to this point has requested documents in electronic form. So most of the time, it's just me having to search or me just requesting something from a department and being able to email it. I'm actually working on a rather large records request right now, and the requester has asked that everything be printed in hard copy. That's going to be over 1,000 pages of printed documents and emails. That's $50 we can charge for all of that paper and ink and toner. We're going to be charging him some of the labor to do this because, again, one of the more common requests I get are for all emails relating to, insert whatever subject line. That's a very difficult thing to comply with because it's extremely broad. Emails are, hundreds and hundreds of emails are generated in this building every day. It's rather burdensome to try to comply with those kind of requests. So I try to work with requesters to kind of narrow down what are they looking for to expedite it. And in general, most people have been they enjoy working with me in that regards because I'm not charging them because they're not putting a huge burden on the town. And if we ever get to that point where some of these requests are becoming burdensome, I'll have to start charging for that labor. Again, if it's information that isn't in the public's interest, and that's kind of my overriding philosophy. In general, I think the public has a right to know pretty much everything that goes on. So I really try to put as much of that information out there as possible. Carol and I work pretty hard about getting meeting minutes up on our website. I've put up our annual town reports going back to 1990. I'm going to be starting putting up some even older ones. For historic purposes, I put up old town bylaws and zoning bylaws. Our original zoning bylaws were 8 pages, including the cover page and the back page. It's quite a remarkable document to actually read. It's pocket-sized. So that's, some of the information that we try to just get out there preemptively, and we can actually refer people to the website as opposed to having to create a whole official public records request and all that. If something is readily available on the website, we can just point it to them and try to assist them.
Makes a lot of sense.
I talk a little bit about, I was surprised by this number. I went into my public records tracking program, and I've only had 74 requests, which I was somewhat surprised over because it's about 2 years. That's from 35 different requesters. When I actually start looking at the requests, well, one of them will be for like 6 different people's emails and records. So that really doesn't show the amount of work and the amount of each request can actually be a multiple request and that kind of thing. People seem to be very responsive to the efforts that Carol and I do as far as getting the records out there. I encourage people to email me, to contact me any way possible. I try to actually keep things not officially public records requests. There's a procedure that goes along. There's legal language that has to happen when things become an official public records request. I try to keep it informal, keep it friendly. If somebody asks me for something, I'll try to get it with them within the hour. I mean, I don't see any sense in taking the 10 days that I'm actually allowed to do. Why do that? I mean, it's in everybody's best interest, really, to get information out there. I do point out a couple of concerns, and actually one of my bigger ones just popped up yesterday, and that's the use of personal email. When it's tricky, especially like with elected officials, because you're elected officials. You're not a government employee except for state purposes, for open meeting law and all these other regulations. You're considered an employee. I had a public records request for emails from personal email addresses for board members for, I think it's like planning and zoning. They are allowed to request that. The state, the legislature, the courts have all ruled that town information is public, regardless of the platform that it is on. So even if it's in your public or your private email, if you're discussing town business, your emails become ripe for public records requests. It's up until literally yesterday, nobody's ever really probed that issue. again, town employees really only use their town email addresses. It really is only an issue for elected officials. But I would strongly encourage everybody to start moving on to getting an @norfolk.ma.us email address. I know all Board of Selectmen members have one, but probably start expanding that to some of the other boards, especially land
I
use.
thought all board members used that address.
In speaking with Jack earlier today, I guess not. I guess it's available, but it's not. We actually, as a town, pay per email address because it's Google. So I guess they weren't automatically created, but I believe it is something that is easily doable for the town. Just because, so how I have to deal with that records request, I have to send an email to those board members, ask them to search their emails for, I give a couple of different search criteria based on what the request was, and then have them send me back a response. I then, and I'm, again, being this is the first time I've had to do this, my response to the requester is actually, I copy the letter I sent the board members and then their response stating that they didn't have any emails that were relevant. That's tricky, and that's not a good way of going forward. And it's a pain, that you would have to search your own email addresses for stuff. So yeah, like I said, I think going forward, moving on to getting everyone on a town email address would be a great idea.
We should make that well known to all. I mean, I know when I got on the board, I was told that day one, that all communication is through. And
it's in there within the open meeting law and public records law. Again, it's, asking board members to actually deeply read any of that stuff can be somewhat tricky. But yeah, I definitely would agree that it should be reemphasized with the boards.
Yeah.
So,
I thought they all were. Not, huh?
No.
any
Don't hold
questions
me.
you have for me as far as public records and?
Are you going to be sending something out to employees and to board members to let them know?
I can.
Yeah, I would encourage you to do that. I thought everybody was on it.
Anthony, I have something for you very quickly.
Sure.
One of the questions that I field pretty often as it relates to electronic communications with government business is why we're not able to interact on social media platforms. And I'm kind of segueing into an agenda item later
Yep.
on. But could you just talk briefly about what our responsibility is and
Sure.
what we're trying to mitigate?
So social media is considered the same as every other electronic medium and document. So it is all, and I'll just use the Facebook example because it's the easiest and what most people can relate to. So everything that the town would put up onto Facebook would have to be archived and have to be somehow available for a public records request. It's difficult with, say, Facebook Messenger and communications. You run into open meeting law violations. There's only 3 Board of Selectmen members. If one of you posts something and another one comments on it, you've just created a quorum, and that's in violation of open meeting law. And that's been determined by the courts, that use of social media. That's why I don't encourage the use of using like Messenger or even really comments on municipal Facebook posts. I really think the Facebook usage for the town at this point really should be posting of straight information items. There are outside companies and programs that do archiving of social media because this is a national thing. Many states are starting to run into these issues as they start utilizing social media more. They get records requests for that social media, and private companies have come up. They're a little expensive. I want to say a company like Archive Social, it's like $5,000 a year. I don't necessarily know that we have a social media presence that would require that kind of expenditure at this point. I think going on to a town web page or a town Facebook page that refers back to the town's website. Police and fire Facebook pages are always popular with people. They like to kind of see what's going on. But really maybe minimizing the number of social media sites that the town has to a very small number, using those to just disseminate information and seeing how the public really reacts with that. And then as we evolve our position, if we need to do some sort of archiving program, that'd be great. Social media is here to stay. We do need to use it. It's just, it's tricky because the laws don't really identify that social media is different. Social media is considered the same as, when I put up a post on Facebook, they consider that the same thing as when I write an email or generate a memo. It's just a document. Well, that's not the case, but until the laws and the courts really catch up with technology, we're subject to their rules.
And responsible for maintaining and archiving those
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sorry for the sideshow.
Any other questions?
No, it was well done.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
And, obviously, feel free, you can always shoot me an email. I'm in the office all the time, so.
But it will be a public record.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anthony, thanks for all you, Carol, do. And by the way, how's your dad?
Doing better.
Good.
Doing better.
Please give him our best.
I will.
Thank you.
Jack, where would you like to go? Want to get some of the easy stuff out of the way?
Easy stuff.
There isn't a lot there that's easy. We could do
Sue
this.
says Todd.
I'm sorry?
Sue says Todd. Financial report.
Okay.
He's the second briefest person. Low bar to you then. Hello, Todd.
Hello, Jeff. How are you?
How's it going, Todd?
So you guys should have the little bookbinder report that I put together earlier today. The first section is going to have the budget to actual. The first page is going to be for the year ended as of 6/30. And we have revenues, expenditures, as well as the operating transfers in and out. Gives us a net of about 47,000 plus. So our revenues, we're on track with what we anticipated for budgets. I've also included previously, if you look at page 2, you'll see that was as of December 31st, the last time I gave you guys a presentation, which was back in, I think it was March. So that was the December 31st results. It did not include the excluded debt, so I added the excluded debt in as an item that we pay anyways for the budget purposes. So you'll see that on the first page towards the bottom of both the revenues and the expenditures. Does that make sense?
I did have one question, Todd.
Yes, sir.
On page 2.
Yes.
Under the debt service, is that just a timing issue?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you.
So again, on page 2, that's as of December 31st. Those were the payments that we've made up to that date. And since then, we've finalized the payments that we need to. Along with the debt service, if you go back to the first page, so we had a budget of $694,374. And we actually only paid $669,638. The savings there came with the bond that we did. We actually refinanced some older bonds, which saved us some monies on a long-term basis. So it lowered interest rates on the new bond. So first point is the general fund. Pages 3 and 4 is the water revenues for the water enterprise. And again, budget to actual, we actually show a little bit more positive because revenues were up over our expenses. Some of those expenses that weren't incurred include the salaries and wages. There's a couple of positions still open within that department. And then pages 5 and 6 are the wastewater enterprise that we have. And the revenues pretty much match the expenditures, just shy about $1,800 for the
Jack,
wastewater.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just curious, has there been any, I know one of the issues we have with wastewater was the percentages to the different entities that are involved in this. Has there been any change in that or renegotiation in that?
No change in the structure. we have had some success in collecting from
That's obvious.
our biggest.
Yeah.
We still, there still needs to be some work done to figure out what'll happen if there's more development over in
Right.
that property.
So it's, the percentages are still the same? Yeah, okay. Thanks.
So that difference between budget and actual is the collections?
Yeah, we had some past dues, I believe. Right?
So our revenues budgeted are to match our expenses that we anticipate. So the 125 matches with the salaries, expenses, and the reserves of $20,000. So that's how the 125 is derived. Then we anticipate, based on that 125, that we're going to have the collections of that. However, we have an issue with one of the accounts where they're not making payments on that particular portion that they actually owe. So we
Yeah.
actually have,
So we collected from the Stop and Shop entity. We're still working on Mr. Borelli, right?
yes, sir. So that's in process. So that's pages 1 through 6, which is operations for the past year. Page 7, just came in today. DLS gave us approval on the certified free cash. The general fund is $1,033,194. The water retained earnings, $1,066,000, and the wastewater services of $92,615. That's monies that can be utilized for various things, which we'll go over in a second. Usually capital items to make up differences on transfers or what have you that we have throughout the year. Any questions on this? Did you all get this? I'm hoping that you're all on the email list from DLS.
Yeah, you should have got an email today, no?
Did not.
Kevin? Okay, I'll check your,
I did.
I know you did. You told me. I think you saw it. Did you get it?
I was driving most of the day today, so
You FYI'd us.
it could
on
be
it.
in my email.
Okay.
I don't think so, but it could
it
be.
was not, you should have,
You should get it.
I know, I got an
automatically
email
from
on it
the
today.
list.
I'm not sure, it may just be the chairman, because we have to input who's in different roles, and it may just be the chairman that gets that.
Okay.
Okay. Next page, upcoming special town meeting. This is going to be the transfer request. There's several different sections on this. We have a couple of bills from last year that were not paid, small bills for a Ryko copier. The total amount is $501.63. I apologize, it looks like that total column didn't add in the $249.25 on the right-hand side. The actual total is $501.63. We'll transfer that out of the town administrator's expenses for this year, so it shouldn't be any issue with getting that paid as long as it's voted upon. Prior year bills, typically what happens is, bill will come in towards the end of the year, and we have up until July 15th to make payments on any bills that occurred the previous year that we have. If we don't have the bill as of that, but we've incurred the services, what we do is an encumbrance. But if you don't know that you have a bill that's not paid, that becomes a prior year bill because you've fallen past that deadline in order for it to take effect. So just doing the right thing to get those taken care of. Moving on to departmental transfers. There's not that many as far as the general fund is concerned. Conservation Property is looking to add a line item on their budget, which would be property maintenance, looking to put signs and things of that sort up, which would be total requested was $750. For the public safety building, I had to go out and get $3.5 million on a band in order to keep the cash flow for that project going. When that band comes due in March, there's an interest payment of $38,537.92 for that. And then the Board of Health has requested for an LSP with Buckley Mann about $40,000 to cover the expenses that are going to be associated with that. So total of general fund transfers would be $79,287.92. Water transfers, mea culpa. When Bob gave me some budget numbers early on in the season, there was some forms going back and forth. The finalized ones that he gave me, I updated all the DPW stuff, but I failed to update the water department, which was included some white water engineering services that he needed additionally. So when the budget was actually approved, it did not include those items. So in order to make it whole, we need to transfer in from the retained earnings, which have already been certified, as you saw, $1,066,000, 35,000 for engineering contract services, and for utilities, 2,500, a total of 38,110. And then also wastewater, 2,700 additional for expenses related to wastewater. Again, it's the white water expenses that increased a little bit. Both those items would come out of the retained earnings from their respective enterprises. Getting to FY19 ambulance receipt transfers. Now, when we were doing the budget, we kind of figured to make the budget balance, we took a couple of items out of the fire department's budget, and we plan to do transfers from the ambulance fund to cover those that were specifically for ambulance related in the fire department's budget. So we took out $31,000 for salaries and ambulance operations of $30,000, and there was $7,000 for training related to ambulance that we removed from their budget that requests, knowing that we were probably going to request transfers from the ambulance receipts. So those three items were budget-related items. The $67,000 is the band payment, which would be payable for FY19. I am able to not pay that band payment because we do have the opportunity the first year of bands not paying the band if we don't want to, because we technically don't have to pay for the first 2 years of the band. But the idea behind doing the ambulance was to put it on a 5-year program, pay it off over 5 years, then run a new ambulance and continue to do it that way. This would coincide with that plan for running that program. So that'd be $67,000. And I know, as in last year with their billing for the ambulance, they were short and we had to do transfers at the end. They're on target to be short again because of the number of billings that they go out for ambulance. Obviously, next year we'll have to increase it for the budget purposes. But to make them closer to what I expect them to actually come in, and it's $5,000 more for the ambulance billing. Total of $140,556. Again, that would come out of ambulance receipts, so it wouldn't hit anything on free cash. Any questions so far? Turning the page to page 9. Capital requests. Typically, capital requests are going to come out of the free cash that we have. There's several items, as you can see from the list. First one, advisory board reserve account. We had to do a advisory board reserve transfer earlier this year for the roof over at HOD. We had needed the $50,000 to be earmarked so that we can move forward on with the MSBA and that project to get the roof redone over there. In order to do that, we actually had to take the monies out of the advisory board fund, set it up in its own separate account, and then show that account to the MSBA so that they would be satisfied with moving forward, because we had to show them that we had that stake available. So that's to refund the advisory board reserve account. Building department is looking to get a vehicle, as their vehicle will not pass inspection this next go-around. Got a couple different quotes. The one is for a Ford Escape. It's going to be about $24,000. Maintenance department is looking for a vehicle, a transit van. That one's going to be about $24,000, and I do have copies of the quotes in case you guys have questions on that. Police department, typical years past, usually this time of the year, they look to get about 2 vehicles per year in order to keep their fleet of vehicles, new, because they're run basically 24 hours a day, so they get very high mileage very quickly. The all-in price for the 2 vehicles is $115,500. Fire department has a need. They got a grant for the SCBA's, which is self-contained breathing apparatus. That's required. The ones that they have weren't going to pass the inspections anymore, so they have to go forward with this grant. The grant actually, $171,000, I believe, is the amount that we're going to receive as part of this grant. The grant total is $180,000. The difference between those two numbers is the amount that we have to come up with, add that in with the compressor and masks and everything else that you need to have in, the total comes up to $99,466, which is the differential between the grant that we're going to be receiving and the amount that we have to pay to cover the entire price for all the breathing apparatus, including the face masks, the tanks, and then the compressor to run it. They looked at potentially refurbishing this compressor. That's a no-go.
And the face masks have, one of the reasons why the cost is so expensive, Cole can correct me if I'm wrong, but the face masks have heat, thermal imaging, that's right, which they have handheld equipment right now, and which is getting out of date. But if each firefighter has thermal imaging equipment built right into their mask, it's obviously a much better situation.
Okay. So that's the fire department. Energy committee audit. I've not actually seen, I believe the number is 100, I'm sorry, take that back. It's $15,000. They're going to be putting an article in, I believe, for the audit that they're going to require, which is going to approximately cost about $15,000. Zoning bylaws, this is Rich McCarthy. He's looking to rewrite the zoning bylaws in total, so he's looking probably at an all-in cost of about $25,000. And then we get into some of the bigger numbers. DPW, Lawrence Street, this is the utility supplements, which includes Verizon, Comcast, and Eversource, with all their different utilities that have to go through that project. We have to supplement that cost because it's not going to be covered within the confines of the grant that we've received. So that's $94,000. And then the engineering services, again, not covered by the grant that we're going to be receiving, which is the 1.8 and the 500,000 for that project. Our cost would be about 172,000 that we have to make up. We've already spent 13,000 and change, I think. It's 185.
We did for those for the bidding process.
Right. In total.
So a lot of these things are, I know we've had some discussions about these, and we'll still have to go completely vet them through.
But these are the requests that have been received, not necessarily that we've been a grant, but up for discussion at this point.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Oh, okay, I'll start. I've got a couple of questions. I thought the Energy Committee audit was $9,300.
I haven't seen the final bids.
That was the proposal they came in. That was the quote they gave us. I mean, it's not a lot of money difference, but can we get that? I know you're taking a good guess at it, but
They did send in a motion, and that's the number in it.
15 or 93?
15.
Okay, when they were here, they said 9,300, but obviously it's changed. Okay. We talked about Highland Lake and Bush Pond, which is not here, which was a request of $20,500, and I think all three of us supported that. The LSP charges that you show back under the departmental revenue transfers,
Yep.
that 40,000, is that relating to the new proposal? Or is it relating to incurred costs?
Yeah, it's the new proposal from Mabbitt, is that right? Frank?
Yeah, but that is the new proposal for future work. That is not,
Correct.
not for the work that's been incurred.
Yes, and it's more than, I believe, the most recent
The reason why it's
proposal we got was like
32,500.
32,000, yeah.
Right,
But
okay.
I think Rich is also planning for
Additional testing.
additional
Yeah,
testing,
I
because
know.
this will have to get us through next May.
I just wanted to be sure that was for future and not
Correct, this is for future.
incurred. And there was one other, I mean, I've always sort of had the benchmark that we try to keep about $400,000 of free cash after we do this. Can we get away with one cruiser and not two?
I haven't,
I mean, I know the answer is yes, we can
Completed
get
it,
away
yes.
with it, but I mean, how depleted will that,
I've had.
we bring it up to the chief?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then I know Cole is going to visit with us on a staffing consideration. But Cole, are you going to, I know you've had some changes. For those at home, unfortunately, our noble firefighters went up to Lawrence to help fight that devastating scene. And unfortunately, Peter Petrusik, our deputy chief, was severely injured, fell through the floor of a burning building. And it's going to take some time to heal. which is, please extend to Peter our very best. And
He's watching as we speak.
good. I knew he would be. He's probably also working on the budget as we speak, too, so knowing Pete. So you're going to talk to us later, but is there anything that would relate to the transfers that you're going to? You don't have to explain the number, but do you have a number?
Yes.
And it is? And then you'll get a chance to explain it, but I'm just trying to add up numbers here.
Figure 43,000.
Okay. All right, those are my questions, gentlemen. Jeff?
I would imagine the zoning bylaw rewrite, is that for engineering and legal? Is that what the 25,000 is? I would
Yeah,
assume.
that's kind of a new, actually, Rich kind of, well, I shouldn't say completely new. We've talked about it in the past, but, we kind of this came up in the recent discussions of, moving things between the planning board and the building commissioner, et cetera. And Rich and I said, we rehashed the old topic of having a complete rewrite of our zoning bylaws, and it's been on our to-do list since probably when Ray was first hired.
Right.
So this is hiring somebody like Mark Bobrowski, who would come in and who is a zoning expert beyond experts, and come in and help us just completely rewrite our zoning bylaws. Rich moved very quickly to get in touch with Todd to get this on the list today, so I'm kind of surprised to see it. I'm surprised to see it today, but that's something we should do at some point. Whether or not we want to tackle that right now, I don't know if right now is the right time. Probably have a good discussion with the planning board and and others to see if now is the right time. But
Well, if we defer one vehicle, we add on the chief's request and we add on the 25, basically it's a $5,000 trade. So that would leave us with 329 as opposed to 334. Rounded up, 330.
So one vehicle, add 43,000 and drop to
And
25?
20,500 for,
Oh, and
yeah.
25.
So we're adding 63.5 and we're taking off 57.
So you're spending more money than Todd and I had proposed.
Well, Chief is going to present his case here, but I just, for purpose of discussion, I thought for right now, it'd be nice to have that number.
Yeah.
And not that it's, I just should have thought about it earlier. I wonder if, can we move that public safety ban interest? That would be excluded, right? So would that be, couldn't we roll that? I mean, we can think about it offline, but I think we can roll that into the excluded debt, I believe.
Which part?
The ban for the public safety project, because we voted to exclude all that debt, I believe that the ban interest would also be rolled into that exclusion, so.
Why wouldn't it be?
Well, there's just some technicalities between paying the ban and then moving it over to the long-term interest. It's not something I don't think we've had a lot of experience with recently.
I'll confirm that number. Leave it where it is for now, huh?
Still, we still need to do a transfer for it. It's just where the source comes from ultimately.
Well, how do you guys feel about these requests? I mean, the advisory board, we have to, because we've got to give them back their funds. I know Mr. Bullock's truck is a mess.
Maintenance could hold off. Maintenance could hold off.
Maintenance could, yeah.
He's got a fleet of old.
The SBAV system, that's a gotta-do. We're committed to the energy zoning. You could hold off, but we're committed. The utilities, that's, I think Comcast did not charge us. I think that's all Verizon and Eversource, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need to take a vote on these tonight. We can talk about these more as we get,
Right.
in October, as we get closer to town meeting, but.
And, engineering services is a, hopefully we'll get reimbursed from those at some point in time, but,
I'm hoping.
but right now, because of the timing, we have to spend it. So, and Highland Lake and Bush Pond, so yeah. So we're at 330. If we did that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good, Jim, to at least reflect where we are today in terms of our thinking, and then we can revisit it. But, would recommend we make the adjustments based on best information and collective thinking of the board. If, you know, if Kevin's in agreement, I would think that makes sense.
In close to 1.7 in stabilization?
1.6 with the $100,000 moved out.
That's close to 1.7.
It is close.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 100,000 moved out where?
We had to fund $100,000 out from the stabilization for the KP budget.
KP schools
Gotcha.
last year,
Yep.
yeah, which I was hoping to put back. I know you were too.
I was hoping to put 250.
Okay,
There we go, more people here.
Thank you, gentlemen.
all right.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Todd.
sir.
Thank you. Good work, Todd.
You don't know where to go next?
We can arm wrestle between the water department and the fire chief. Okay, we got the water department.
All right,
And Ryan's on the clock, so we want to get him out of here. Do you want to just, any questions for Scott about the two contracts?
You all had a chance to look at the contracts?
Briefly, yes.
Are you comfortable with them?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we do that real quick then? And is that agreeable?
Yes.
Gentlemen? Okay. So we have basically three items for Scott. One is the police lieutenant's contract and two, I'm sorry, and the clerical union contract. Right. The clerical union is a revision of the one we saw before.
Jack will do the lieutenant.
All right. Go, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, lieutenant's
Real
contract.
quick.
Lieutenant's contract is really just he's just carrying on his sergeant's contract with about a 5% bump.
Last page is
You know, Bobby Robert, Lieutenant Shannon, I should refer to him as, and Chief Stone and I all kind of sat down independently, did some fun negotiations. I think this is, very fair compensation level based on comparing him to not only Lieutenant Murphy, but it's to Deputy Chief Carroll and Chief Stone's contract. Lieutenant Shannon comes with many, many years of experience, as well as 2 master's degrees. So I think his, and then the rest of his benefits are really based on the patrolman's contract. There's no, he hasn't asked for any increase in vacation or any other type of compensation. Certainly, he is getting the incentive pay, otherwise known as the Quinville back in the day. He doesn't get, there's no double dipping for having 2 masters, but he does have the ability to recognition for 1 master's. So
questions?
I would recommend that you approve that contract.
forward.
With pleasure. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then we have the clerical contract, which I think you've seen
Several times.
several times.
Yeah.
Certainly, Scott was instrumental in getting that done, and he can probably speak to any of the highlights that you may have.
Yeah, so I can go through the major changes pretty quickly. If you go to page 4, you'll notice that bargaining unit changed to the words units. You'll see that throughout the contract. It's just for consistency's sake. So page 5, you'll see a sentence that's removed that has to do with the Supreme Court judgment on charging fees to people who want to be out of the union. Page 6, this is really just a rewrite of the same stuff, the paragraph before, to make it a little bit clearer. The compensation rate, is this dying?
Nope, that's good.
The cost of living increase is 1.5%, which is what it was in the last contract. All the compensation is the same as was in the last contract. So that's what this paragraph says, and it's just a clarification in that paragraph. That's what that change means. We did do some renumbering of paragraphs and pages to make it clearer.
While Scott's moving forward, I just want to thank Todd. Todd also participated in these contract negotiations, and he was a big help.
So the next, this is a new section, page 11, section 2, sick bank. So we agreed to set up a sick bank with the clerical union for people who have extended illnesses. They have to be out at least 20 consecutive workdays or more to be eligible for this. The sick bank can hold a maximum of 150 days. To be eligible for benefits, an employee has to donate 1 day from their accumulated leave. Each full-time employee must earn 100 hours of unused sick time, and part-time employees got to have 50 hours at the start of this so that they can participate. The committee that will make these decisions is one member of the union and a designee by the town administrator. So, and the ultimate arbitrator, should there be a disagreement on whether a person could receive benefits under this, is the town administrator. Decisions, sick bank awards are not subject to grievance or arbitration procedures in this contract. There is some potential increase in cost. These are sick days that may not be used, but it is a common thing. I can tell you, having lived through a serious illness in my family, having a sick bank was extremely helpful to me personally earlier in my life. And it's something that we do support.
I think the last thing is just the job.
Yeah, so the last changes really are at the end, the list of jobs. We've been having to go through a lot of hoops in order to add jobs and promotions and stuff. So what we've done is I've written job descriptions, and we've added for a better word, generic job at each level so that we're able to provide people the opportunity to move should they take on additional responsibilities. It's not just based on years of service. It is someone that's taken on additional responsibilities, and there are some guidelines in these job descriptions. So this gives us, this is a good thing for us. It gives us and Jack the opportunity to move some people through. We would post these jobs as they come open, but it gives us much more flexibility than we had in the past. So those are really the big changes. The salary guidelines or grids are in the back. Those are based on the cost of living, the existing grade structures plus the cost of living increase of 1.5%.
Scott, I just because I've never seen it, what is a grade 8A?
It's a technical position.
The IT.
Yeah.
That was created about, maybe when Bob Markle was here, actually, about 13, 14 years ago, and it was because we realized we needed kind of an adjusted compensation level for somebody who's an IT person.
I don't remember seeing it.
Technology folks typically make a little bit more, so there's this recognition in a broader range.
Questions, guys? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just a question, after these changes are made, the final document, will we have one more look at it once, because this is a marked up?
There is 2 final copies here. I do need 2 signed, so there'll be 2 copies here for you to sign.
Okay, so Sue has, okay, answered the question.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that at the end of the night.
I should mention one other thing. Our payroll individual in this contract is coming out of the union, will be full-time pretty much on payroll. She'll watch the window like everybody else does. But that is a position, I think it's confidential position. The union agreed with it, so we'll be posting that position very shortly.
So it'll just be a personnel employee rather than a union person.
Back again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, thanks.
And Todd, thank you.
Yep.
We have a motion on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Can we just, can we just take a couple of these quick items, and it'll take 10 seconds, I think?
You're the chairman.
We have a request to reduce the Energy Committee from, I guess it is at 7 now, listed as 7?
9.
9
9, right?
to 5, and the rationale being is they're having difficulty getting a quorum.
Yeah.
So, any comments or concerns with that?
No.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we can always easily move it back up.
Right.
And let's quickly do the liquor licenses for the Lions dinner meetings.
So you have 7 one-day liquor licenses for September 5th. So we're retroactively fitting that one in. October 23rd, January 22nd, February 26th, March 26th, April 23rd, and May 29th. Obviously, those spring dates are 2019.
And this is all the way it has been for years.
Yeah, they have a bartender from
As a fellow
Basil's.
Lion, you would know it.
They have
Okay.
a bartender from Basil's that comes over to the Grange.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And because the water, some of this, Bob, is the snow rates and stuff is, we can get that all with you, so quick, do you want us to close the warrant this evening?
Yes, please.
Motion to close the warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Mr. McGee, welcome.
If you wouldn't mind, wouldn't mind starting, I had passed around here, Ryan printed out, this is our water assessment report. And I don't know if we need to dig deep into this, but anytime I get a chance to pass this around, it's great information, and I don't want anybody to say they haven't seen it. So this is our second attempt, not our second attempt, this is our second report for updating exactly the state of our water condition, so to speak.
This is the one we saw last year.
This is the last
The
one.
date is accurate, okay.
Right,
All
this was
just-
updated from one that we did probably 5 years ago.
Right, all right.
I do. I think we'll get a few more if there's anybody in the audience that wants to look at it, but I don't know if we're gonna chat with this in front of us, that's just information, you might have questions. Kevin, I don't know if you've seen it before.
No.
And I did, in the stapled document, that's what we presented last year. I added in these graphs on the back end of the paper-clipped package, which weren't presented last year. Since that was in March of 17, we really only had water usage through the end of 2016. I wanted to put some more, the last couple of years on some of the graphs, so you have some of the more up-to-date information. Really, the numbers didn't change dramatically from previous years or what we expected. The usage that the town's using is, still coming up against the Water Management Act withdrawal limits, and the maximum day usage in the summer is basically equal to what the 2 well facilities can pull out of the ground. So, those being the 2 main concerns or challenges that the water supply faces. One being there's no redundancy, so if one of the 2 well supplies were to have a major issue, the other supply can only really pull half of the water that the town needs during the high usage times in the summer. So, obviously that would at this point mean buying water from one of your neighbors if that were to happen. So you have that concern, and then the other concern is the amount of water you're allowed to pull out of the aquifer on an annual basis. And that, obviously, the main concern there is the amount of development in town, and can you sustain withdrawals under your permit limits, with the number of new connections that keep coming in the last, several years. Since development has picked up, it's been about 50 services per year for the town, and at that pace, if you dig into this report, you'll see that at that pace, you can sustain, you can maintain your existing permit limits, but I guess if you look on page 7, there's a kind of a graph that shows, there's the historic growth, and then there's the trend line, the 50 services per year, the kind of the stepped green line there, that's your permit. It goes up every 5 years a little bit, DEP allows for some modest growth. But then the dashed red line with the triangles, that was more or less what we call the worst case scenario. So there's a lot of services hanging out there. There's water mains in front of people's houses. They have chosen not to connect so far. There's developments that were conceptual at the time of this report with a lot of units that, could connect potentially over the next 12 or 15 years. So we said, what if, everybody connected, what would happen? And that's that kind of worst case scenario. So, the growth potential is out there, to exceed the permit limits, but the current trend is below the limits. So I think that's the kind of the moral of that graph.
Question for you. If all goes well, and I know you're going to talk about it a little bit, but let's assume it all goes well, we would not have Holbrook permitted for another 2 years probably, right?
Holbrook Street, the permitted, I think, realistically, we'll get the permit could come in quicker than 2 years, I would think. In the next 6 months would be my hope that we'll have.
When will they be online?
When we'll be online, I think you're talking probably best case scenario next summer of 19, if it's permitted, if the DP permitting stuff, and we got to get through Charles River watershed, we got to make them happy, and some of the town of Millis has concerns that need to be addressed. So if we can get that all wrapped up this fall and winter.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
only a-
So that gives us the redundancy and gives you the opportunity to rest some wells or clean them or do
Right.
whatever's necessary to maintain.
Right,
their
that
use.
addresses the redundancy issue.
But it doesn't address the amount of water we can take out.
Correct. So the Holbrook Street source, whenever you ask for a new withdrawal point, you have to ask for a revision to your Water Management Act permit. You can ask for more water out of the watershed too. It was our decision that makes the permitting process a lot longer and a lot harder to get through when you ask for more water, and that to get these redundant supply online as quick as possible, because that's the immediate need, it would be better to just say, we don't want more water, we just want another place to take it from.
Right.
So, yeah,
But
but,
I think you can see where my questions are going on this.
yeah,
So, and I know, Bob, you have said we never stop looking for water sources.
right, correct.
So that said, if you look at that growth and you look down 10 or 15 years, we have an issue.
Correct.
What's the solution to that?
Well, I think, eventually you're going to have to go back to, DEP and amend your Water Management Act permit for higher withdrawal rates. And, it's going to be a battle with them in Charles River watershed, because the whole town's in the Charles River sub-basin, and, but, if DCR, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, actually does the population projections and usage projections that DEP uses to, justify what withdrawals they'll give you. So, we'll have to go back to them, and they'll have to redo population and water usage expectations for the town, in their mind, and, it'll be a long process, but, before the existing permit is up in 2029, that's probably going to be a process the town has to go through.
Where are you going to be in 2029?
Not here. I have no idea. I'm hoping. Okay, it doesn't really, I know you're following the process, but it doesn't answer the question about what we do about it.
Right, well, I think,
We've got almost 800 users that could connect tomorrow if they wanted to.
Correct.
We have a bylaw that says all new developments must hook up to town water. Right?
Right. I think when Ryan was talking, and, you know, Ryan being the expert, I think that to expand the permit for more water withdrawal is no more than a growing pain. It's what's gonna happen to other towns,
Oh, sure, I'm sure it will.
you know?
Yeah.
So to get a redundant source on is huge.
Mhm.
It means that, you know, no matter what happens, everybody's gonna get a drink of water.
Right.
So, I appreciate that comment, but the biggest thing right now is to find that well site, and then when we find that well site, let's go look for another well site, because 2029 is gonna come, and then 50 years again, there'll still be people there. We need to provide for that, and it's tough to really, imagine that we're planning now for 50 years, but we need to do it, and we need to do it now.
That's my point, Bob. I mean, I know it's a labor of love to go through this process, and it takes years, not days.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'm just, at some point, we've got to start that process, because we know it's inevitable. I mean, unless all of a sudden everybody goes away, and that's highly unlikely. We, at some point, 10, 15 years down the line, this town will face that issue. And we should be, if it's a 5-year process or an 8-year process to make that happen, we need to start 5 or 8 years before it does happen, is my point. And I know you're always looking for wells, so I think you've probably tested, what, half a dozen sites in the last 2 or 3 years?
Right.
Yeah.
So is this a correct statement that the Holbrook well will give us redundancy, and of course that means we can, we can maximize the utility of the other wells that we have, because we can shut them down, we can maintain them, what have you.
That's probably the biggest
That's the
saving
biggest,
grace.
right.
You let the wells rest, they'll recharge naturally. If you keep drawing on them, they're gonna start sucking the minerals in and so forth, and the engines run longer, and that source can dry up quicker. It's just a common sense thing. At some point, we should talk about where we are with the Holbrook Street site. We had a pump test done, so I'm gonna let Ryan take away on that, but you're right, that's the big thing. We need to get that, and then we need to chase some other sources. We, again, I've repeated this, I'll repeat it again, is that we have another Mill River, Jack, right? Mill River, that we purchased the land, we own the land. It was a promising well. Environmental Partners did the pump test with us, ran into some glitches with, some legal problems with Franklin. So I think after we square this away in 2 years from now, I think it, even now, we need to get together with Franklin and start talking about what we can do to get that well online. Another day conversation, but.
So let me ask the question a little differently. This is where I was heading. So in terms of redundancy, now we add the additional well. Was it ever envisioned that we would always have one of the wells out of commission, or is there some utilization, 50%, utilization on a particular well, one of 3 wells, and rotate
Right.
that bird? Because that's where the question of how much water we can have available, regardless of the permit, in terms of how much water we can pump and do it in a way that I guess is more conducive to resting wells, maintaining wells. And so I'm just wondering, did we add a 3rd well only to have one shut down all the time and rotate the burden, or did we add a 3rd well, and at any point, what's the likelihood that one of the wells is shut down once the new well comes on? What does that look like given the current demand for water in the town? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah, and I think the answer is, really both. It allows you that operational flexibility. It'll prolong the life of the facilities you have. So that's, 1, and then 2, the redundancy issue of, usually we always recommend that take your largest well offline and see what you have left and compare that to what your highest usage day in the year is, and you should be able to meet that usage. And obviously you guys would only be about halfway there. It's difficult when you only have 2 sites. A lot of times you're looking at towns that have, say, 7 or 8 wells, and if you take the biggest one off, 1 out of 8 isn't that big of a deal, but when it's 1 out of 2, obviously, it becomes a major issue.
we're not in a great situation. If you look at Franklin, they get 14 wells. I don't know how many Rentham's got, but they probably got 12 to 16 wells. We get 2. And if one goes offline, then we're saying, please, don't let nothing happen to the other one.
Right.
Because then we're dependent on an interconnect with another town. And the only real town that we have an interconnect with right now is with Rentham, and we don't have a long-term agreement with them. We approached them on it, and they shied away from it. They've given us water, they've given us a handshake agreement that anytime you need it, but it's not a good way to live. You know, borrowing water from another town is not a long-term solution. We need water in this town. We need to find the land and continue to pursue it.
Okay. So this is what makes Holbrook so important.
Exactly.
And as you had shared, there are, I believe, 5 well sources there?
There are, straws on the ground or something.
Right.
Is there 6?
Yeah,
And when you did the testing, the 5th well, I'm saying the 5th, but one of the 5 went down as, was it the 50, it went down to 42 in the 11th hour?
Yes, the 7th pump failed on a Friday afternoon, and we were to achieve stabilization, which is what the issue DEP is, we're working with them over, is the water level, the groundwater level has to drop less than, I think it's 0.08 feet over, I think, a 24-hour period. And we were at like 0.12 feet, and the pump failed, so we didn't quite get there. And it's, we had a big meeting here with them, and, went over all the groundwater modeling we did. We're confident and optimistic about, what we think the well field can produce. But, DEP still has to, they have to check off all their check boxes. And they're reviewing all our data, and we're waiting for them to give us an opinion on whether we achieve stabilization or not. That's where it stands right now. It's, probably in the next couple weeks we'll get some sort of answer. And, if they determine that we didn't, we'll have to somehow, or in some capacity, rerun the test to achieve stabilization. We have to prove that we can get to that 0.08 feet over 24 hours. So, there's 2 options. We can we could go forward and put the actual finished production wells in and then pump them and measure it that way. Or we can redo the test with the test wells that are currently installed, and then we just have to pump them for whatever it takes, 7, 8 days, 10 days, and wait till it achieves that small drop over the 24-hour period.
And we might have to lower the rate, right? So we'd get a smaller withdrawal ability from those permitted from that particular well.
Yeah. So I mean, I think.
But that's the worst case scenario.
Yes. Best case scenario is they look at our data and they agree that, or they determine that we achieve stabilization and we can move forward.
I see it, the way I see it, Jim, is so we went out there and we did this test, and we were pumping 50 gallons a minute for 6 wells, or 5 wells, and the 6th one went down to 42. And because that happened, that's a pump test result. And because that happened, correct me if I'm a little bit wrong here, but we with environmental partners decided to do a modeling, and the modeling will cast out, with great certainty what kind of rate you can pump, and it makes up for that, loss factor from 50 down to 42. Which is only a fraction. The DEP sitting in this room told us we respect the modeling, but we'll make no decision on that modeling. It's either going to come from the pump test results that we just explained that slightly failed, or we're going to have to go back out in the field to do it again, and that's going to come at a cost. The question we have is, if we go out, like Jack said, and pump it for a lesser rate, suppose we won't settle for anything less than 300 gallons a minute, which is comparable to what we get out of these other. Is it worth spending $2 million on 150,000 gallons a minute? So we got to find out what the DEP is going to come back and tell us. What's going to be, or we're going to ask them and they're going to approve, pretty much them telling us what they're going to allow us to pump. For that investment, we need to make a decision. What Ryan's saying is almost like, I'm hoping it was almost a joke. You don't want to spend $2 million and then run a pump test.
Correct.
That's kind of like
Right, that
We'll
was
never
an
say that
option
again.
that
Yeah,
we're not
you're talking
pursuing.
about
That seems like a no-brainer.
Right.
Yeah,
But the pump test, the straws are on the ground, it should be a little less expensive, I would think. But
yeah. It's not gonna, I mean, the first time we did this, we had to install the wells.
Yeah.
It was a lot more work. Now it's,
so the sleeves are there. But it's still, we're talking anywhere from 30 to 100,000. I'm still confused in the numbers that we're getting tossed around. So let's hope we don't even have to worry about that, that the DEP, they seem to be kind of like on our side with this. They understand. I'll tell you a little bit further, and Jack, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The other hurdles we have is that we have to answer the comments from the Charles River watershed. We got to answer comments from our bordering town just on the other side of the Charles River, and that's Millis. So one of the solutions, well, it's hard to explain this, but Millis seems to have stock in their, they prefer to pipe us water and buy it and have us buy water from them.
At an outrageous rate.
In the meantime, Millis has so much water, they can afford to sell water to others for profit. So, to me, it's kind of like I think the DEP sees that we're merely looking to supply water, potable water for our people here, and it's not for any other reason. Where Millis is looking for, to make some money on it. The Charles River watershed, I don't think it matters who you are. They're going to find a reason to give you a battle. But I think they're reasonable people, and if we respect them and answer them properly, that'll be all right. But those are the big challenges.
And this will all be wrapped up in the next 30 days or so?
30 days. Well, DEP
We're at the whim of DEP, so.
takes as long as, they take. I would say in the next couple of weeks, I hope to get an answer from them on the stabilization issue. And then.
Well, that's what I meant. That's the big issue.
Yeah.
That's huge.
We have
right
to run
now.
the pump test again. That won't be until the spring, right?
We'll have to, the pump test, it really all depends on the groundwater levels. So you don't want to run a pump test when groundwater levels are low, because your approved rates are based on how much water you have available in the column of the aquifer. So if you start too low, you're kind of shortchanging yourself. So we usually do it in the spring.
Today would have been a good day.
That's what I was talking to our geologist today. I said it might not be too bad this fall. The way things have been going. So we would take a look at where the groundwater levels are, as far as the timing of a redo of the pump test.
That'll be an interesting couple of weeks. Guys, questions or anything?
No questions.
Kevin?
No.
Just from a historical point of view, just when, we talk about Millis, Franklin, and Rentham having, many more wells than us. Norfolk started off way behind the 8-ball, I guess, because we used to just have a distribution system, so we didn't have wells, we just had water coming from Franklin. And then probably in the 80s and 90s, we put our wells, maybe 70s, some point, when we started the water department and the water commission, that we put our own wells in. So we didn't have the foresight, I guess, 100 years ago to start putting wells in when land was very abundant in this area. So that's where we're a little bit behind the 8-ball from other towns because of that. And if we do
Thank
buy
you.
water from Franklin, we've got to overcome the fluoride hurdle. That's
correct.
Issue for another day.
Weber tank.
Weber tank. Revenue?
Cell tower, right?
Right. So we have an RFP going out onto the street. We have, we've been approached with interest from, is it AT&T? Who is it?
T-Mobile.
T-Mobile to, and I'll just give it right over to Ryan. He really knows this. It's another source of revenue to put an antenna on our water tank, and when we look at $35,000 a year, it's worth taking a peek at. So from there, if you don't mind, we're
Yeah, they approached the town saying that they were interested in putting some antennas on top of the Weber tank, and they gave us kind of a draft of what they would want to do, and it's basically replacing the Metro PCS equipment that was on there, and it was taken down, I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that. And I think T-Mobile bought Metro PCS, so it's almost like they were replacing their own equipment. So we put together an RFP. It hits the street tomorrow, and they have till October 31st to give us, basically the RFP is provide what you're willing to pay the town for lease of the space on the tank in 5-year increments, with a minimum of $35,000 a year. And, you know, there's many requirements in there about, you know, DEP has standards about putting things on water tanks, things like that. But we'll see on October 31st if they were, sometimes cell phone companies ask for these things and they don't submit, and it's all for nothing, but they seem pretty gung-ho. They've been calling me on a weekly basis for an update, so I would expect we'll get something from them on October 31st.
And it's
Great.
not exclusive to one company, right, if another company was interested?
No, Verizon's already up there.
Yeah, Verizon's up there.
But somebody else could respond to the RFP, I think, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, we can't just simply, you know, offer them a lease. It has to be put out for public procurement, just like everything else.
But if you get more than, I mean, you get another
Yeah, whoever
company
offers
that-
the most money.
Well, is this not, I mean, if we wanted to welcome two more, we could, right? I mean.
I think.
You could.
I think the way it would have to work is that you would accept the highest bidder. That's the way it's worded, and then you would, if you wanted to accommodate somebody else, if somebody else could be accommodated, there's only so much space up there.
That's my, you answer, okay.
Yeah, you would have to, you could put out another one. If somebody else bid and said, you know, there's still room for us, we want to do this, can you put out another RFP, you know, you could do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Snow rates.
I was wishing we could talk a little bit longer on
Oh,
that.
okay.
I'm really impressed with the way.
Oh, he's making copies, is that what
Yeah,
he?
I'm sorry. Normally, I have a copy of our snow rate
They're in your
proposal.
packet.
They are in the packet.
But
They're in the
They're in the packet.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Oh, let's see.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Susan, all right. Okay, thank you.
You want him to keep talking now?
No, this may be, this is fairly important to us. You know, the snow plowing is, it's tougher and tougher with a great economy to get committed snow plowers to take care of our town. And we're been notified, thanks, we've been notified that one of our larger contractors who takes care of our schools, municipal properties, and, you know, the town center isn't going to be with us this year. And with him leaving, leaves 6, 7 pieces of equipment. So, with that, we decided to get in front of you as soon as possible, try to get here at an earlier meeting, but as soon as these are approved, if we can approve them, we can go out and solicit prices to the contractors that we do have, the ones we're trying to entertain. This is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Thought I'd note that the Red Sox are beating the Yankees 1-0, just in case.
Oh, I should have brought the hat. No, it's got to be from the beginning. We're not letting you off the hook on this one.
Yeah, thank you. These guys have it already.
You okay, Cole?
Couple of things, as you're looking at this, I didn't prepare to do it now, but a survey was done by North Attleboro where they went around to a much greater degree than this and solicited all the towns for all the benefits that the towns do to what they provide the contractors. And so I want you to know that what we do and what we have been doing, up until last year, we used to pay the contractor an hour travel time. So we called them on the phone, and if they get there within a reasonable amount of time, we paid them that 1 hour. We took that away, for good reason. But one of the other things that we do is we supply the contractor fuel from our tanks, because quite often there isn't any gas stations open or anything like that. And we deduct from their invoice the amount of fuel that they use, and we pay them, we let them, they pay it at our price, which is probably 50 cents a gallon less. It's a pretty good benefit. I don't know that all towns can say they do that. Another thing that we do is we expect them to come with their equipment inspected and ready to go, but in the event that there's a problem and they lose a cutting edge, which is the biggest throwback to any snowstorm, you hit something and it breaks, we'll supply them a cutting edge. And it's a little bit of a cost to us, but it's comforting to the contractor, and we know that they're not going to disappear to their own shop and we lose them. We get them in and we get them out with another cutting edge. So it's pretty attractive along with these rates that we do that. One other thing that I don't know how I wanted to think this out a little bit, but when I was at a previous town that I worked at, we gave a guarantee. So if you had a piece of equipment, we were going to say that you're going to get $1,500 if it's 70 degrees all winter. The likelihood that that is happening is no. But what it does is that we guarantee every piece of equipment $1,500. It usually covers their insurance. And them knowing that, because a lot of these people have to insure these vehicles specifically for snow and liability that the town expects from them. So I didn't do this now, and it's not to say that we can't do it in another meeting. I'm going to think it out a little bit more and explore. I can't remember what I once did, but it's almost foolproof because it's guaranteed that it's going to snow, and it's guaranteed that they're going to get at least that much. I don't know if we've ever paid anybody less than that. It's going to come with a contingency that you'll get 100% attendance, and it's deducted from their profits anyway, so it comes right back to us. But it's nice, attractive little thing to do.
Well, I have to tell you that whoever you're hiring and however they're doing it, our roads are better than any surrounding town during storms.
Yeah.
You guys do a great job.
The guys do, right.
Yep.
Yeah.
We want to try to...
So what is the pleasure of the board?
I guess, Bob, what specifically are you looking for from the board tonight?
I'm looking for the board, I'm recommending that the board approves the rates proposed in that column that says 2018, 2019.
So I did a bit of a comparison with towns around us, just to get a feel for it.
Take a peek at that for a second.
Yeah, this should have come out in yellow, so it's a little bit easier for you to see. But I also attended the CERG meeting the other day, and it sounds like it's a common problem throughout the communities in the area. No one wants to plow anymore. How do you get your plowers, and how do you keep them? So we had a good, healthy discussion about, like Bob was saying, a lot of towns are paying that insurance, because the insurance that they have to be able to plow is expensive. So they're guaranteed that $1,500. There's a lot of interesting talk that we had about how to keep this going moving forward, but we're not alone in this situation.
Where there's a zero, does that mean you just don't have the data?
Yeah, so not everybody compares to every piece of equipment that we have. Some communities have different pieces of equipment. But North Attleboro did, in conjunction with Surge, they reached out to pretty much like 351 towns in Massachusetts and compiled the data. Some of it's way off there because you're looking at like Boston and things like that.
Right.
But comparative to our area, it's a nice snapshot to be able to take a look and see how we stack up. Bellingham was pretty much our closest in comparison.
So would anyone, what's your pleasure, gentlemen?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like we're competitive. We're in some cases slightly more, as you said, to perhaps make us a little bit more attractive, maybe to be able to secure the resources we need. So, I mean, they look fine to me.
I mean, overall, this is less than a 3% increase, just running quick numbers.
Yeah, it's pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the snow equipment rate schedule for 2018, 2019, fiscal 2019.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Did we get it all, Bob?
Thank you, Ryan.
Get everything,
Appreciate it.
yeah. We'll keep you updated with the water,
Thank you, sir.
those test results.
Thank you
Thank
very
you very
much.
much.
Nice to see you
Thanks,
both.
Bob.
I
I just
think
want
we've-
to tell you, you and your crew have done, I think, a terrific job on the roads, the
Yeah, I
paving and
echo
such,
that.
given
You got a ton
the
of work
condition of those roads after last winter in many towns, and what you've been able to accomplish within the constraints of the budget, that you're having to
And
contend with.
we have a system, it seems to be working, and it's just, again, it's a reflection on the labor force, because it really is, because we're nothing without our labor force. And we've been blessed with some subcontractors that, have been with us long enough that the teaching has gone by now. You can almost get out of the way and expect a nice job, so that's what it comes down to.
I mean, some of the recent work, I was actually surprised that it was still going, that there was still funds available. It's great.
Thank you for remembering that. Thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks,
fellas.
guys.
Kevin was commenting about your pavement management system, too, the other day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time with them recently.
Yep.
And got a lot of good information, and I think we're going to have a pretty cool proposal for a communication piece for the residents in the town as to the condition of the roads and how it's tracked and prioritized.
Forgive me, but Jeff, did you even meet Barry? I'm sorry. I think you're the only one.
I think
Barry's our new assistant director, and since he's come on, he's been all that. The reporting that's coming from his desk across from me is stuff I haven't, it's a little better than the pencil and paper that we're used to. So you're going to see some stuff.
Yeah.
We have a lot
Good
of stuff-
reporting stuff.
A lot of stuff on the
I
roads.
think you've set a pretty high benchmark, Bob. I think you underestimate your, I think you set a pretty good benchmark. But I know you'll pass it.
Oh, hopefully I do. We have a lot of stuff coming out, so
Good.
we'll keep you guys posted as to what's going on.
Yeah, Kevin's
Thank
been
you.
over,
Thanks,
so
guys.
he's seen it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thanks so
you,
much,
Joe.
guys.
Thanks, Ryan.
You still with us, Chief?
Oh, didn't we say we had a hard stop tonight at 9:30?
9:30, I think it was, yeah.
Still got 45
So,
seconds.
we could probably reschedule this for a couple of weeks from now. Oh, yeah, I got to start up the PowerPoint presentation. This is going to
Oh, no. PowerPoint, Chief?
Where's the clown cart? That's what I want.
take park right out in the...
Oh, no. That's a sore topic of conversation.
Nothing, bottom of the seventh.
Oh, nothing bottom of the 7th, yeah.
Yankees have 2 hits. That's encouraging.
It's a good night for them.
Judge is playing?
This could be it.
Judge is playing?
Yeah.
Yeah, Judge is playing tonight.
Oh, I'm nervous now.
Judge and
The way the
Chapman.
season's going, we're going to Oakland. Hey, we're going to Oakland. Fire up the train.
Come on, you got to be optimistic.
We're going to Oakland.
I don't know how we get 2 Yankee fans in the same room here, this close to Boston.
my man
I don't
over
know
there.
how that
Kevin's my
happens.
man.
Something not right there.
That's right.
Feeling it.
Hey, you got to respect everybody's loyalties here. I mean, come on.
The Red Sox are the 98 Yankees.
All right, Chief.
All right, here we go.
Can you do us a favor and slide that chair out of there? Thank you, sir.
Well, you want the, I'm driving, or just tell me to hit the button?
Well, hello. Am I good? Am I good on the phone?
Try this one, Chief. Green light.
Okay, this.
No, it's just for home, so don't worry about us.
You're good? So, this was hopefully going to be a very mundane presentation. I've had an opportunity to speak with Jack on this topic for the last 14 years, so it's nothing new. And with Jim, probably about the same amount of time. But we've reached a period where staffing has truly become an issue, and I'm not going to go into our time spent in Lawrence on Sunday, but convergence of elements have certainly created some problems. And just to give Kevin and Jeff just some background, you both have spent some time at the station, but we staff 4 groups with 3 people each. We have an officer and 2 firefighter paramedics. And the big question that comes into play is when we go to work, where does that 4th firefighter come from? Well,
5 years ago, the board was gracious enough to fund us for the infamous 13th firefighter, which we put on the schedule for 5 days a week, basically 10-hour days. And that situation worked out well, but one of the problems we were running into is because of industry standards, firefighters work 24-hour shifts. It was becoming less and less attractive to those that we might be able to hire. We've since changed that this past year to a 4-day shift, which leaves us 3 days without coverage. But what that has done is it ensures that we have people available when we have the most amount of calls. The 4th firefighter can also come from the recall, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go on. But why the 4th firefighter? Well, one of the things just to talk about is in February of next year, the Department of Labor Standards and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, in its infinite wisdom to protect firefighters, adopted the OSHA standards. And OSHA is going to require us to ensure that when we arrive at the scene of a fire, that we have 4 people present. 2 people go in the building, 2 people stay out of the building to back up the 2 inside. It only becomes an issue when somebody gets hurt. And when somebody gets hurt, it becomes a very significant issue. There's another thing that goes hand in hand with this in terms of why the 4th firefighter. I have some situations going on in my personal life that both Jack and Jim are well advised, well aware of, and certainly off camera I'd be more than happy to speak with the other 2 members of the board, or in the viewing audience, anyone wants to call the station. I'm more than happy to provide an overview of what's going on. I'm away from Norfolk more than I've ever been in 15 years, and Pete as well is away from Norfolk, and based upon what happened in Lawrence, he'll be probably away from the department until January, and I've been instructed, as he's watching here tonight, that he'll be back to work in January. One of the other things that goes hand in hand is the National Institutes of Science and Technology 8 years ago came out with some actual studies on firefighter staffing and what the ability of a firefighter is in terms of performing work. And we operated from the standpoint for years that 3 firefighters was a good number, and we'll talk a little bit more later about why it was a good number then, but really not a good number now. But the National Institute of Science and Technology confirmed that having a 4th firefighter available increases the workload or the ability to perform tasks on the fire ground by 20%. And as we talk about a little bit more on the recall, that'll become more and more clear. We've had a lack of callback that we've talked about. So those are some of the things that go hand in hand with what we've got. Bing. Boop. So this is just a graphic of what a well-staffed company looks like. On the left, we're in Franklin at a 3-alarm fire. When we arrived, a Franklin fire lieutenant was trapped and jumped out a window. It was very a religious experience for us, and we went to work in the back of the building. On the right is Tucker Road in February 2016. That's Deputy Petruchik and firefighter Hamilton. We have 1 firefighter at the pump. We had a report when we arrived there that at least 1 person was trapped in the building, and fortunately that person was able to self-extricate and exit. Both homeowners were transported to Providence for smoke inhalation. But you get an idea of the significance of an incident and how quickly things can change and why there's a need to have someone there available to go to work. Beep. So here are some of the numbers that are kind of compelling. Back long before I arrived, we had a staffing of 26. Everybody lived in town, primarily a call fire department, and that number of 26 meant that generally you had more than enough people to respond to incidents. We go
Cole, just for folks at home, because if they're just looking at it, not hearing exactly what you said, that was a call fire department primarily. And those
Yes, it was.
A lot of those numbers were callback, not full-time employees.
Indeed, and virtually all of the operations of the fire department back then were based on full recall of all the staff. We go 10 years ahead. When I got here, what happened to the other 8 guys? What did you do? So anyway, we ended up with 18, but again, they all lived in the community. We were transitioning basically from a call department, starting to transition to a career department at that time. And we had the ability to have those people, because they primarily lived here, to respond. We go another 10 years, we actually had 22, but now we're starting to see the increase of people who obviously don't live in the community. So that gave us a number really of 13 to play with during the course of during the course of time when we needed assistance. And today, we rock bottomed at an all-time low. I've had conversations with Jack about this on a number of occasions, and with Jim as our liaison. And a lot of that goes hand in hand with, we transitioned really from the call side. And we'll talk a little bit more of that going further. The problem we run in with call, good people, but they're available when you don't need them, and not available when you really need them. For instance, the number of false alarms that we have on the Meeting House complex during the course of a month, we don't need the people really to come. We just want to make sure the ladder truck's covered and ready to come out the door, and we could do it 2 or 3 people. But prior to 2014, we used a lot more people on the callback. One of the things that happened between '04 and '17 is back in '04, 50% of the time we were calling everybody back. And the shift was only handling, obviously, 50% of the incidents. Fast forward to 2017, the shift is handling almost 96% of all the times that there's an incident. It's being handled by the shift or by the recall. And one of the other things that happens in the fine print down below, it's the Dow Jones averages from 2008. We've got a decline in the number of people actually being recalled or being available to come back. From 2005 to 18, we went from 8 progressively down to 3. Right now, we're averaging 3 people on a recall when we need help.
Before you click that, can you go back, Jack?
Yep, sorry.
Cole, in 2004, of those 18, how many were full-time?
2004, we were still at 8. We transitioned in 15, where we went to the 3 on the shift. So that got us up to the 12. So when you look at those numbers in 2004, there were 10 call people and 8 career firefighters. You go to 18, you have 10. You've still remained 10 call firefighters, but you now have 12 career people. And when you look at that, a number of the career people at that point were living outside the community.
The chief's position figured in that staffing number, or no?
That number is, no, the chief is not.
Okay.
I dropped that position out simply because it's not a hands-on position.
One of the things that Cole is not saying, that he should say, is that you and Peter have acted as that fourth firefighter in a number of incidents. I mean, you have been on call 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
I have a tendency, sure, to be there.
Well, you have.
And
So you and Peter have supplemented, Peter being the deputy chief,
Yes.
have supplemented that staffing. And I think that's an important point to where you're going.
It is, and I think one of the things you protect about, just to go to a side, is the culture of today's fire service is really divergent from when I started in the late 60s, early 70s. I got 44 years on now. Back then, I mean, everyone was part of the system. You wanted to be there, you wanted to participate, and that's divergent. And one of the things that I'm not really responsible for, you got to take your hat off to Pete. I mean, he brings the culture to the Norfolk Fire Department. The people that we have that serve, particularly the career guys, you look at a Billy Getchell who just joined us, came from KP. You look to a Gus Greaves who just joined us, graduated from KP. They're now paramedics. They're highly respected, you know, not only in our business where we are in Norfolk, but they're coveted by the other communities. And why? Because they're trained to that level. And just as another aside, out of the last 6 people that we brought out on the call side, because we are still trying to bring on a younger set of people that have never been exposed and get them into an assimilation type training. The problem we're getting is Pete trains them so well, everybody wants them. And out of the last 6, 4 of them had left. One left to become a police officer in Manchester, New Hampshire, and the other person left because they felt that this wasn't something for them to do. And the other collision point in dealing with call staff is you bring people in and they want a sense of belonging to an organization, but we can't, from a dollars and cents point, have them involved in a lot of what goes on. But then that's why the shift is out there. And then finally, we've really compressed, diplomatic word, the number of call people we have, simply because they'll come to training. We're paying them to train, but we're not getting them on a call. So why should we pay people to be adequately trained, be ready to go, but not perform? You know, They wouldn't do it on Broadway. We can't afford to do it here. Beep. And there's a lot of information on this, but this is a compilation of a situation that we've done over the last 5 years. We try to take a snapshot of where we are in terms of callbacks. And we do this primarily for Jim because he's had a lot of questions about how we work with the recall. So this is May and June of this year, and we're looking at, in May, there was 76 incidents where we had station coverage, and these are all related to when the ambulance transports.
Well, I was just it sounds like you're going to explain station coverage, so.
I'm getting there. Thank you, Jack. Every time the ambulance goes out, we call back man for man or firefighter for firefighter to cover. If there's 4 people on, we call back 2. If there's 3 people on, we still call back 2 to maintain that staffing level. And in May, we had 76 situations where the ambulance transported. We called back. In June, we had 58. One of the interesting things to look at there is the number of times that we go out with multiple calls, first of all. You look in May, 41% of the time when we called people back to the station to cover, they went back out the door again handling another emergency, and about 26% in June. Now, one of the things that we look at there is this is a roller coaster each month when we look at these. Sometimes the numbers are up around 60, sometimes they're below 20. It started out 5 years ago that we were about 15 to 20%. Today, we hover right around that 40 to 50% of the time we have people in that they're going someplace. And here's where it gets interesting. You look at the recalls that are filled in terms of how the numbers go. There was 19 incidents where nobody came back, and 8 incidents where only 1 person came back. So if we had a situation of less than, we had basically situations where we had less than 3 firefighters in the station. And that kind of parallels what happened in June as well. The disturbing thing is full recalls. There were 12 and only 5 in June, but 3.5 or 3 firefighters on a recall. And I just want to highlight some of the notes here. One of the things we have in there is Medway. And I wanted to bring this up because I had this discussion with Jim recently. Medway, when I started in 2004, was a department that was covered by 2 people Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. They are now a fire department that is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with 4 people. We went up there in May at about 1:30 in the morning for a house fire. And the only people from Medway who responded were the 4 people on the shift. They arrived at the fire. They got a knockdown on the fire. We came in behind them, backed them up. And that night we were lucky. We had 4 people come in for station coverage. Fast forward a few days, we had a fire at R&D Auto. Building was burning in the back. We went down with the 4 people on our staff. We had only 1 person come on the recall, and it took 15 minutes for them to arrive on the scene with ladder 1. We immediately had called for Rentham for assistance. We also used Foxborough that day. And then go to June, we were called to an extrication at the high school in Medway for an assist. We only had 1 person come on the recall for that particular day as well. So you see how this kind of flows in there. One of the most important points is in July, we had a cardiac arrest. Patient was initially revived by people in the field who were using using the AED and using EMD from our dispatch. While we were responding, we were told that the patient was breathing. We arrived. The patient was talking, returned to cardiac arrest, was brought back, and talked all the way to the hospital. The interesting part about that is there were 4 people on the shift. There was an ambulance call, another ALS call for difficulty breathing, serious incident. So 2 people left. We recalled. We only had 1 on the recall, but it was a paramedic. And the reason we were able to save this person is the recall satisfied the requirements. Having the second medic, we were able to deliver the medications that were required, the patient care that was needed pre-hospital, and the person had an outcome. And I know Jim has had a chance to actually talk with people that were there. So these are the kinds of things that kind of build on where we're going with this now 14th person.
You start, and I'm sorry if I missed the point, but you start talking about Medway and the fact that we're responding to them, and they only have their 4 guys on.
Yes.
They don't get any callback internally. I wasn't sure if you were going to make a connection between them helping us out or Or
I can't, we use a great deal of mutual aid. I mean, we probably, because of how we're situated with the number of towns that border us, we probably do more out of town than we do in town. But when we operate in town, we're generally using at least 2 departments that come in to assist us. Use the R&D Auto for an example. We had Rentham in Foxborough. We also had a Foxborough ambulance to treat a smoke inhalation patient at that location. And we do that simply because we want to make sure that we've got adequate staffing coming in behind us. And I think the board is aware of the fact that we divide the town at Main Street. The odd numbers are immediate response by Rentham. All the even numbers are immediate response by Franklin. So if someone was to call with smoke in the building, or if they have a fire, they're immediately getting an additional engine company coming in. We've set up that when we are working, we generally have been calling for one additional piece as well, simply because we're not sure how our recall is going to go. So our reliance, I suppose if you want to look at it on a graph, you would see that we're starting to rely more and more on mutual aid as we move forward. But we're also responding more and more out of town, because some of the other communities experience some of the same problems that we're experiencing. And again, it goes back, I think, to the culture of the, you hate to say in typecast millennials, but that's the type of thing that we're seeing. And the other part of it is that people have families today. In our situation, we have a number of people, the younger members on our department, that have families, have family commitments, and that's very important. You can't be 24/7 unless you're an old guy like me that is here. So this is public information, and that's why it's out here. That's our payroll report. And those are the 16 people. If you throw me in, it's actually 17. Gus Greaves, we moved him over. He's now career. He was provisional for a while. But one of the things to look at, we highlighted that the 3 people in blue, Junker, Amiot, and Newman, probably some of the best paramedics that you'll come across. They work private ambulance service in their off-duty time, as well as serving with us. And they're the mainstay. Manny, Rich Junker, and Mark Amiot are 2 of the original hires from 2004. They're the last 2 that are left. As you know, Russ Hall's gone on. He's now the chief in Holden. And Dave Russo also joined him in Holden. And they were the other 2 originals that we had. We're lucky that we have some of the younger people in there, such as Seth, Kevin, Billy Getchell, as I said, Kate, who returned to us from Canton. Those are the people, and Gus, those are the people who are young enough that maintain that drive, and they're always involved in training, and they're going to be the next generation of really good medics that we'll have in this department moving forward. Small group of call people now. As I said, if you want to use the euphemism, we thinned that herd, because we just can't have people on that list that aren't going to be able to respond or want to respond and just come to training. So we have 2 off-duty career people. Ryan Conley, who lives here in Norfolk, is probably the most active. We had him on a recall today. We had two recalls that he was back on. So that's what we have. There are a lot more blanks. I suppose it's like back in the day that there's more New Orleans Saints fans in the Superdome that wore bags than that didn't. Here we have more spaces than we do people on the list.
Oh.
This is an old slide. It's been out there forever, and this is just the cost. The overall career to bring a career person in, the bottom line is about a little over $8,000. For a call person, it's $6,000. And this is why we're very, very concerned about moving forward with any additional call people, because it just costs a lot of money. We're trying a number of different ways to factor that in, to try to cut that number down by a third, by 2/3, to really make it work. But that'll translate into the final summation here. I talked a little bit earlier about why we're looking to keep the day coverage in place. I think the building block here in Norfolk is eventually get to 4 people 24/7. But right now, the real need is having 4 people available 7 days a week when 75% of our work, basically 75% of our workload takes place. I suppose you could say that we rely at night when the highest potential for a problem exists because everybody is home, we're relying heavily on recall. But during the day, when it's difficult and people are working second jobs or involved with their family, that pretty much indicates why we're really focusing in on that segment. I think that's the last one, Jack. You can that one. So that was just interesting. So where we are with this is we have a number that Pete has put together, and that number we're looking for bringing the new firefighter in January. However, given the circumstances that we're confronted with now, we've had to kind of revisit that, and it puts a little bit of pressure on us. I mean, first of all, as Jack knows, I'm a terrible negotiator, so the idea of bringing this 14th position on in January is the initial position. I would like to seek approval from the board to do this as early as November. One of the things that we need to do with Pete out is we have to remove the day position to go into one of the shifts. So now we're back to the old days of 5 years ago, where we only have the three guys on the three firefighters on the shift, which becomes an issue. We're toying with some ideas on how to address that moving forward. If we're fortunate enough to plug in this 14th position, that'll put us back at least to the baseline that we've established. We probably won't see it, unfortunately, the way this plays out. We won't see the true benefits of the 14th position until next July, because as we move forward, hopefully Pete returns in January. In March, Gus will leave for the Fire Academy. He'll be gone for 3 months, which gets us into May, June area. When Gus returns, then hopefully we're back in the situation where we're across the board with 4 people during the day. But if the new hire comes in and has to go to the Fire Academy, we'll fall back again to that situation. The numbers as they flow out here for the 6 months, all inclusive, just for salaries, is $28,901. We put together a comprehensive list based upon the slide you saw there for equipment, and I think in a conversation that I've had both with Jack and Jim, I think the most important part for that is to ensuring that we have protective clothing, and that's $3,000. There's another $2,000 worth of equipment in here that we could do what we need to do or try to. So that brings that number up to 31,901. To add 2 months to this, each month would be $4,816 based upon what we have, which would mean if we were looking to bring that position on in November, which I truly think is what we need to do based upon the circumstances that we've been confronted with, that number would be $9,633. So we're in that $41,000 range at this point. I've never come before the board I've come before with ask, but I've never come with a beg, and this is probably as close as I can get to a beg. Even without the unfortunate situation with Pete, we're in this situation just because we don't have the ability to have a firm recall that we need to. I think we need to, as a department, ensure that we've got basic coverage and basic ability to do things during the course of the day. I think that's really important. As I said earlier, I mean, obviously, 4 people 24/7 is great, but you look in terms of budgetary constraints. You look in terms of the plan that was originally crafted by both Jim and Jack back in 2004, 2005, when we implemented ALS and moved it forward. There was always a building block, and the sense then was not to make rash decisions to impact the staffing, but to do it incrementally. I think we've got to that point. I know moving forward, one of the things that we're going to look at is the SAFER grant, which is a federal grant available for hiring additional personnel. The grant is a 3-year period. The first 2 years, the federal government pays 75% of the position. The third year, federal government pays 35%, and in the fourth year, with the new change in the program policy, the town has the ability, if they can't afford, they can release the position. Prior to that, the requirements were that the town had to fund the position through the municipal budget, at least for 1 year, but that's been relaxed. That would be one thing to look at. We've had some sidebar discussions internally in terms of mitigation that we looked at when Brownstone was at the Southwood Hospital as another. But that's down the road, but I think we come to you, or at least I come to you, with something that is exceedingly important to me as the chief to run and to run your fire department is to add this position. And as I said, convergence of unfortunate elements just exacerbated the whole request on this. I've had a chance to talk with Jim about this, and Jim asked me to bring a real number here, and I think in good conscience, I'd like to say, we need the extra $2,000 for all the equipment, but I can't in good conscience, because I think it's more important that we try to do what we can in terms of providing equipment, uniforms. I know I'll sacrifice my uniform allowance, not that I need it, but can certainly sacrifice that. And I think it's more important to view the ability of the town and the approval of the board to see if we can, bump this up 2 months, and so that I think that's what the ask is. And as I said, I'm pretty gosh darn close to a beg on this one. So that's what I got.
That was easy.
Well, I'll start. I mean, I think Cole would probably say that I've been kind of a buddy and a thorn at the same time, because we have gone through these numbers together many, many times. But I don't think this is on my own. I'm speaking only for me. We cannot compromise on public safety, and you have convinced me that we are at a situation where this is something, and of course, unfortunately, with Peter, which is a true loss in many respects.
Couldn't happen at a worse time.
Yeah. Well, or to a nicer guy, But I personally support this. Now, I've had a chance to go through this a lot with Cole, so I will defer to you two to talk it through and think what you think.
Ask the hard questions. I mean, one of the hard questions you could certainly throw out is, well, why don't you continue with trying to call people on? And the answer to that goes back, and Jack will validate this. I mean, we came up with several options a number of years ago, and one of them was called the Jack Hathaway draconian method of bringing on call firefighters, which was never implemented. But
Should have been.
And realistically, and as much as we kid, as realistically as it was, I mean, the gist of that was, if people want to serve as call firefighters in Norfolk, they should be willing to give something back. And we crafted part of the elements of Jack's idea. And what we're doing now with these young kids that are coming in to join us is we're looking for 20 hours of their time. They're required to spend 5 hours with each one of the 4 work groups on their own. And during that period of time, each one of the 4 work groups have an ability to say, well, we should put this person on, or we shouldn't. We've had a couple of washouts, but by and large, everyone that's gone through that process has had an opportunity to join us. The longevity of their belonging to this organization is, certainly dependent upon what their desires are, and the people, once they come on, develop a real appetite that they want to do this. And I can tell you that the hiring out there is just incredible. The people are leaving. You have Medfield, which is going ALS. They just hired 5 people. Medway, with their SAFER grant, hired additional 4. Foxborough SAFER grant's hiring, I believe, 6. And then you put the retirements on top of that. So there's a lot of competition. We're fortunate that we have 3 people are going through a call situation right now. We have a former firefighter out there that may be in the mix. So we have some options available, but that's why we simply can't take a chance and just have open enrollment and bring people in to basically wear a T-shirt. And that's a term that's used quite a bit around the station. We need people that are truly committed to doing this and knowing that their role is A, support, and then B, providing backup coverage on the ambulance. It was just so gosh darn important to us right now.
Mr. Chairman, I think, I like to have fun with Fire Chief Coleman, but, Fire Chief Bushnell, but in the interest of time, I think he's done an outstanding job. I think, and I, as I told him earlier, I would support him in this initiative, and I think it's important that we, we go through the proper hiring process, but this is an important need for the department at this time. Certainly if you guys have any more questions.
I too support it.
Can we get to 2 months? Can we go shoot for November? Obviously after town meeting.
Subject to town meeting approval, but yes.
Yeah.
And that could then.
Well, I would support it.
Okay.
I mean, I
Gentlemen
support
can
this.
speak for themselves.
We've been through, this before, my visit, one of my visits to the station. You reviewed this, and, at the time, I think some of these weren't at the point they're at today in some of these considerations. So right now, I mean, you got, the demands aren't getting any less with the town continuing to grow. We know that. These the challenges with the callbacks, that seems to be just going in one direction. It just seems to be getting more and more difficult, on your organization. These OSHA regulations, that in and of itself, I think would warrant a conversation, I would think. Now, there's a little bit of time. There's not a lot of time, given the amount of time it takes.
I've lived through this
to
in Connecticut
bring on
firsthand, and it's tough. Here, there's a lot of background. You have the PFFM, the Professional Firefighters in Massachusetts. I know our collective bargaining group have some real concerns, and I think they're spot on with their concerns. And I've discussed them with Jim in the past, who agrees. So, I mean, you have an unusual situation that you have basically labor and management lining up that, there's some things that truly need to be answered to ensure that no one gets shortchanged in this process. There's some ability that exists that could conceivably happen.
You have my support.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
And confidence.
Oh, I got the full range of the proposal during my orientation meeting with you, so.
You heard
I
it.
got to vet out all of my questions and concerns at that point, and you addressed them all, and I appreciate that. And certainly approaching this as a need versus a want, absolutely. So I have my full support as well.
And that's a good point, and I wanted to bring that up. Thank you. We're well into need and bypassed want a few stops ago.
Yep.
Sounds like you got 4 votes. Now, we can get the town to agree, you're all set.
Very good. Thank you very much, and like you said, we'll see you in Oakland.
Oh, you'll be happy to
Don't
know.
buy
You're
the
ahead,
ticket
you're ahead
just
now,
yet
by the
there,
way.
Cole.
You're ahead now, 3-1.
No, come
Yeah,
on,
you
just,
are.
you're just having fun with
Some
me.
Walker guy hit a home run or something?
Neil Walker. Hey, do you need a first baseman? I bet you we could get you Great
Okay.
Bird sheep.
Kevin, let's, you're staying for the Facebook part, I assume, right? Or you just have nowhere to go tonight? So let's go right to that, because Kevin, I know you've worked very hard on this, and
Screen back on, or?
I know it's something that
No.
you feel strongly about, so take it.
So,
No.
I appreciate
Go
that,
for it.
but no. So one of the things we
Thank you,
talked
sir.
about, thank you very
Thank you,
much,
Chief.
Cole.
Good night.
One of the things that we had spoken about when we were talking about some preliminary goals for the year was to enhance the community engagement piece and find new ways to get information out to the community and the residents. One of the opportunities we saw to do that was the utilization of the town Facebook page, something that hadn't been utilized probably to its fullest capacity up to that point. We took that website down, or that Facebook page down, in July to do some testing with some options that we had to be able to get information in there and out to the residents. One of the things that we found was that we needed to walk a line between getting information out while also protecting ourselves from the public record interests that Anthony had spoken about before. So in a collaborative effort with our Director of IT, Mr. Tron, our Town Clerk's Office, Carol, and Anthony, and Jack, we worked together on a way that we'd be able to get pertinent information into this page, update it, and also be able to protect ourselves from the exposure of public records requirements. So what we've done is we've added a few different configuration changes to the page. We've updated a bunch of the information there. We've included some filters and parameters to be able to protect ourselves from comments being put on the page so we can alleviate that concern in its entirety, while also building some integrations in so that you'd be able to have information from My Town Government be able to port over and create posts on the Facebook page to identify any updates to meetings, the times, the place, the agendas. We're also going to be pulling over the good folks over at NCTV, Katie in particular, helped with creating a tab on the side of the page that will automatically upload all meeting videos for the government site. So their channel just for government meetings will be pulled over to the Facebook page and be available on the side on a tab over there. Looking past that, we also built an RSS feed, so we'd have a connection to the town website. The goal here is to be able to link everything back to the town website and make that be the point of reference for everybody. Anytime something new is posted in that What's New section, there'll be a post created on the Facebook page that'll link you back over to the website, so we can get that information out to the community as well. Finally, we enhanced the ability for somebody to connect with a further question, since we removed the commenting capabilities, by adding a link to the Contact Us button that'll bring you right to the town webpage Contact Us page that will go through all of the departments, have the phone numbers, email addresses, so you'd be able to get your question out to the right person at the right time. We went through a long presentation, went through a long process of back and forth. Everybody had input on the project, and I think that after some discussion, we also decided that it would be pertinent to have a social media policy be put into effect to not only identify what the scope of this project was, where we started from and where we are now, but also looking forward and how we're going to have to protect ourselves, both from the town's perspective, the employees of the town's perspective. So we also had some input from Scott Bragdon on that piece of it as well. So what we're looking for today is support for the kind of executing phase one of opening that page back up, getting some feedback from the community on the new enhancements to the page, and accepting that new policy, I believe, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Happy to answer any questions.
Personally, I congratulate you. I think it's a great idea. I know you went through a bunch of hurdles. I talked with Carol and others about it, and I think it's a great idea. Congratulations. I know it's been a pet project of yours, and I think it's going to be great. All for it.
Appreciate it.
Well done.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you've been able to overcome the records retention and those concerns in terms of, having a quorum and such, which, Anthony had talked about previously, if you've been able to overcome them, with the support of these resources, well done. I mean, I support it.
Want to vote?
Yeah.
Sure.
And how should we word this? One, to adopt the policy,
Yep.
and to move forward with reopening the town Facebook page?
Yeah, republicizing, whatever, reopening, whatever word works for you. We get the concept.
Think you could handle that one?
The motion?
Yeah.
Move to approve the social media policy, and then to authorize the publishing of the town Facebook page.
You got it.
I will second that.
Well, I was going to.
That is
So
your-
moved.
Okay,
That is
there you
his
go.
move, I will second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well done.
Awesome, thank you.
Kevin deserves
Well done.
100% of the credit.
That's great.
These new kids with their social media stuff,
That's it.
Now my grandkids
Get
will
that
know what's
right.
going on.
I Snapchatted last week, so
Um,
my personal side.
We're down to the last couple of things. Just one comment, we did have posted on the back of this agenda an executive session on town administrator contract. While we do, and I've checked with town council, have the right, because it is amending or discussing his contract, to do that in executive session. We are not going to do that in executive session. We're going to do that in public session. Because there's really no reason not to. So where are we?
Town Government Study Committee? Is that-
Yeah, Jack did a rough draft of an outline. Did you all get a chance to look at it?
No, I don't think
Oh,
they did.
okay.
Yes, I
I have
did.
it for them, but.
You mean this?
Did you get it? No, you didn't. Those are the ones I gave you. That's something else.
Okay. Oh, no, I
Um,
haven't seen it.
I believe we have 5 candidates for this right now. Kevin, I think you had Christine Baelish?
Kristen, correct.
Kristen, okay, sorry, excuse me. And we've got Mr. Garrity, we've got Anthony, we've got another citizen, Chris Cleverton, and Jonathan Smith. So we have 5 at present that would like to participate in this, that have agreed to. I assume Kristen has?
Yes.
Okay, as has Chris. So I would like to recommend that we appoint those 5 folks this evening, if it's agreeable.
Can I ask you to say their names one more time, please?
I'll give it to you. I got it.
And I would suggest that we have 2 additional openings. I think we probably need about 7 people. So any of you have any further recommendations on people that want to participate?
I know there was a few people who have expressed interest that were waiting for an outline like this to come out, so that they'd be able to have a more defined view as to the scope of the committee and what the expected output would be. So I think this will help with garnering some more interest and solidifying some of those more candidates.
Okay, so are we agreeable to appointing those 5 that expressed interest and having 2 more positions available for folks that have additional interest? And then what I would suggest is after that committee is together, that they come to a Board of Selectmen's meeting and we go through this. And we sort of discuss the parameters and the process and all of that, if that's agreeable.
Can I discuss one quick proposal, just for feedback, as it pertains to the people that are participating on the committee? With the understanding that there is going to be the possibility that some of the things discussed and recommended in the committee could impact positions that committee members may go for in the future, is there any kind of benefit that we would have to requiring that people who participate in the committee not apply for any position that is included in a recommendation that comes out of it for a given amount of time?
I think I put that right in the middle. I tried to sneak that in there, so that they would be prevented for 2 years. I put. That was based on your suggestion.
Yeah, I wanted to get your feedback on it.
No, that's okay. I saw this afternoon. Yeah,
okay.
No, that's okay.
Gotcha. Sorry, I didn't know that was.
No, and you didn't have a chance to read it, so.
Yep, no, not a problem. I think that's a good idea.
And again, I only took this,
And for those at home, and I guess you could debate the pros and cons, but at least as we looked at it, it made sense, because it's hard enough to find people to participate in committees without creating 15 more committees. One of the things that we wanted to put within the framework of this study is the recall provision, which is a form of, is a consideration around town government. We committed to having that looked at with a recommendation to come back, and I think this is, Jack and I felt, you guys can disagree and we can talk about it, but I think that's where that belongs. Get another committee to deal with that particular issue would be difficult, number one. And number two, it is a town government structural issue. And I think they should take that on and take a look at what other towns do, what the pros and cons of that are, and there are pros and cons, and get back to us. And they can segment that piece out and bring that back at an earlier date if they so choose. For example, if they were to get together now and they were to pick that on as one of the first items that they wanted to research, and they were in a position to bring a recommendation to Springtown meeting, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding of the outcome from town meeting was that we were taking on the responsibility to assign a committee to review the bylaw itself to ensure that it did not conflict with anything that was existing. Perhaps I misunderstood what the scope of the bylaw review committee was going to be as it pertained to the recall provision. But I imagined it as being a little bit different than the scope of this. Is a big scope. I mean, obviously, you could probably fit anything under this umbrella.
Well, not quite, but yes, it is a larger scope, yeah.
Given the other concern was the road path for this one to completion. This is a long timeline.
This could be anywhere from a year to 2 years.
Right.
But it's also something that they could bring in pieces if they so chose. I viewed that decision differently than you did, apparently. And I went back actually and looked at the town meeting, just to kind of refresh myself on it. You're correct. It was to look at the pros and cons within that, but it was a broader discussion. The discussion was the appropriateness of it, and whether or not there were arguments pro and con against whether or not it was even an article that should be considered. Not just the structure of it. In other words, it wasn't an acceptance that we needed. Let's just make sure we've got the right one. Mm-hmm. This was a broader discussion as to whether or not it's appropriate to have one, and if it is this the right structure? So when I went back and looked at it, and that's how I remember it anyway, and there are pros and cons to that. I mean, if you look at the town of Stoughton and you watch their experience with it, you'd say you wouldn't want it with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
If you look at the town of Rentham, which has one, and I don't think they've ever used it, I looked at their particular one. I think it's fairly well written. If it's used for the right reasons, it's a good tool. It can be used for the wrong reasons. And there are ways to limit and prevent some of those wrong reasons from occurring. That's why I think the structure of that and looking at other towns and see how people have used it and what the pros and cons are of that is very important.
I read a couple other, and I struggled with how clearly I could have made this a lot more descriptive and narrowed the scope, but I didn't want to because I wanted the committee to kind of try and identify. The first thing they should do is identify either low-hanging fruit or important structural changes of the town government, and maybe they do that through an interview process. But anyway, during my just creating this document, I went through and I read Duxbury, Nantucket, and one other town. I looked at Rentham's, but I think there was another town too. But Duxbury was very well written, about what their town government study committee did, but they all looked at the recall provision. Anyway, what I was going to say was maybe there's a compromise, and maybe this committee kind of starts off with the recall provision,
Sure.
so that the timeliness of our town meeting discussion, these guys tackle that as kind of their first review.
Yeah, and that's basically what I was trying to say. If they want to pull that out, or we ask them to pull that out and say, hey, if possible, come back with a recommendation for the spring meeting, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but I do think it's something, and I'm not voicing for or against. That's not my point. I just think it's something that needs to be carefully looked at, because, as I say, I haven't looked at it a lot, but I had a lengthy discussion with a gentleman from the town of Stoughton last year at the MMA meeting, and what they went through was a bloody nightmare.
Yeah.
It was a vindictive tool that was used by someone that lost an election. And it got nasty and ugly and horrible, and it divided the town, and they ended up with a huge deficit because of all of the confusion and mismanagement that occurred during that particular time. It can be chaotic if it's used incorrectly. If you have situations where you have a real problem, I can only think of one time, at least in my experience, where we had that, where we had a person on the board who just never came. For 2 years, did not show up to a meeting. So we were short a board member for 2 years. And we had to wait till the election. That would have been a time, and we could find no way, we couldn't get him to resign, it just didn't show up. So that's a situation, and I know Rentham had that situation as well. Now, they resolved it without the recall, but that's a situation where you might want to have something like that, where there's a very legitimate reason where someone got elected to a position and just doesn't ever show up.
Right.
I mean, and in this particular case, it was very close to making it difficult to get a quorum for the meeting. So it's something that needs to be explored, and I'm all for it. If they want to pull it out as the low-hanging fruit, it's not low-hanging, but if they want to pull that out as one of the primary objectives, go for it.
I like including it in the context of this more broader review, because I think, this whole question of elected versus appointed is going to be part and parcel with some of the considerations. And I think that's where, that recall provision, really, obviously it only applies to the elected positions, the recall.
That's a good point.
And so, these folks are going to be thinking about that kind of stuff when they go through and look at, the form of government that we have today and the form of government for the future. So I think there's a natural tie in there.
And I think, to your point, if you felt there was a commitment that something be brought forward to the May meeting, then let's task the committee with doing that. That's okay. Is that agreeable?
Yeah, I mean, my drivers are only based on what I perceived as the commitment to the voters at town meeting, that's all.
Yep, I would agree.
My perception was that there was one committee that would be defined to this scope and another one that would be defined to this scope. I think that by assigning this committee, knowing how hard it probably would be to fill 2 whole committees at this point and to turn something around before a May town meeting would be difficult, I think that's agreeable, that we would task this group with presenting something for the May town meeting in reference to the recall provision before moving on to the larger scope of items.
Yeah. And they may be able to do both simultaneously, but only have one recommendation for May.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
fine. So we're in agreement. Okay.
Thank you.
No, not at all. It's good to talk that through, because, we both were there and both made the same commitment, so we might as well make sure we do it.
So you
share the
you
same
need
goal.
a motion to appoint those
I would
individuals?
request, if you're agreeable, to appoint the 5 that we have. I don't think we ever established the number.
A 5 to
vote.
7.
So why don't, if we could establish the number to be, is 7 agreeable?
Yes.
I think you need at least 7, because you've got to get at least 4 people in the room to have a meeting, so. So if we could have a motion to establish 7 and appoint those 5, we have 2 additional openings, and we'll get this out on the webpage, and wherever else you want to send it.
Yeah, like social media around the world.
And do restrict it to Norfolk residents, so would you do that, Jack? So would anyone like to make that motion?
A motion to establish a town government study committee comprised of 7 members. Maybe vote on that first, to review the...
The town already established the meeting, the committee. I'm just saying, let's, if we could make that, may I make a friendly amendment?
Okay, I thought you wanted the 7-member, make it a 7.
Just a 7, yeah,
Okay.
just designated as a 7-member board.
I accept your friendly amendment. The motion is to establish the town government study committee, the number of members as 7, which is a point of clarification from prior action taken by this board.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion that the following residents of the town of Norfolk be appointed to the Town Government Study Committee. And those individuals are
Jonathan Smith,
Jonathan Smith, Rob Garrity,
Kristen Bailash, B-A-L-A-I-A-A-C-S-H.
Got it.
Kristen Baelish.
Baelish.
Chris Cleverton,
Chris Cleverton,
and Anthony Turry.
Anthony Turry, for a period of 2 years. I guess that would be effective today, or effective appointed.
You can have it expire whenever you want.
You don't even have to put an expiration date, do you?
Yeah.
You could say for the purpose of until the purpose is served.
For a period of 2 years, or until the objective is, of the objective of the study committee has been achieved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So those folks, tough for Anthony to do, but those folks need to come get sworn in, and maybe they can touch. Yes, as soon as you get the appointment sheets.
Who's going to swear you in? COA Director, Jack.
Very briefly, just so Chris Quinn has resigned, so we need to begin a search for a new COA Director. And the last time we had a opening in that, we created a group of, I guess it was a member of the board, it was Jim, myself, and then Richard Connors, who was a member of the Council on Aging at the time, who collected resumes, interviewed, and ultimately chose the last candidate. I kind of assumed you want to go through that same process, but
Well, yeah.
certainly throw
Should
that out
post
for
it and,
for discussion.
Are you Council on Aging?
I am.
So Kevin should probably be on the interview committee.
Nice. Okay, so we'll go through that process, and I'm sure I'll have reached out to Deb Grosvenor and see if she wants to do it, or another member of the council.
It's between you and Kevin to figure that out.
Perfect. And then, where are we? COA goals. I have a copy of, Jim, I didn't have, well, I don't know if Jim, did you distribute yours? I have Kevin's.
I gave it to Kevin and Jeff, I thought I gave you one, but
Kevin's.
if I didn't.
Yeah, no, I have it.
Okay,
And Kevin.
and I had Kevin's as well.
It's going to take about 3 days for me to...
You need Jim's?
Yep.
I can go make,
Do you want to,
I'll go make copies.
No, it's okay. You don't have to make copies. I'll find it.
what are you looking for?
It's buried in...
Here.
Encyclopedia, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
What is, what's the format on here?
We each do it, you know.
Oh, this one.
What do you mean, what's the format?
Is this yours?
No, that's mine.
That's Kevin's.
Oh, that's yours. Oh, I didn't recognize the, okay.
You want to kick it around? Jeff, do you want to add or delete any that you might feel aren't on those lists?
I think there are a number of personnel changes that are going to be taking place in the town, and some have already started. So I think what I'd like to do is be a resource for Scott, having had some perspective with a number of boards and committees over the years that I've been in the town, and I think that's probably the best way for me to
I
to
know
assist
exactly what
during
you're
a
saying.
period.
Yeah.
We got a bit of a road here ahead of us.
That we do.
Yeah.
Okay. Kevin, I don't have any issues with your three at all. I mean, they're fine. We approach it differently, but that's not a bad thing. Do you have any issues with mine?
No, but there's a lot of alignment, actually.
There is?
between the two,
That's
so-
the good news?
Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't we package those thoughts together and see if we can come up with one cohesive piece of paper? It'll be two, but merge them together. Okay. The last item on the agenda, I think it's the last,
God, I hope so.
is,
Oh, you gotta approve the warrants. Did you do that?
oh, no, we did approve, we closed the warrant, but we didn't approve the
No,
warrants.
let's-
Yeah,
Yeah, and I did it a little differently.
Yeah, so I see.
I included your initials if you signed it.
Oh,
Thank you.
great idea.
Yes,
The guessing game is done.
This is progress in progress right there.
Very nice. I move to approve the warrant of 129,494.57, 123,608.97, 446,576.18, 185,223.22, 747,472.53, and 746,639.31, and 69,900.63. Those are the ones that I signed.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Your turn.
I move to accept the warrant for 65,743.40 and the warrant for 3,469,862.78.
Second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Kevin, even though
That's
you
a
only-
great, well done. That helps.
even though
To
you
remember
only
which date was which is not easy.
Right.
Thank you.
So Kevin, you know you only had two. You spent a lot more money, so well done.
I noticed that. Jim saves that one for me to do.
We'll work on that, right?
Not signing that day.
Yeah. I could see you going, nope, not mine, call Jim. So the last item that we were going to do in executive session, we're going to do in public session, and I'll kick it off, and then we'll kick it around a little bit. As I think, if what I can tell, pretty much half the town knows that
No,
Mr.
I
Hathaway,
think much more than half.
two-thirds? Mr. Hathaway has informed us, oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Hathaway has informed us that he is relocating to York, Maine.
Correct.
And his contract with us expires as of June 30th, 2018.
19.
19, excuse me.
Yeah.
That's right, you're on powered time.
Yeah.
And so, in discussions with Jack, we were trying to think through the timing of this, how we could make it work for both parties, how we get his replacement in, and all of that kind of stuff. Having been through this a couple of times, unfortunately, with superintendents and another town administrator, it's about a 90-day to 120-day process to get your candidate in. So Jack put some thought to what he thought might work. I wish he'd stay till June 30th, but that's a long commute. You haven't sold your house yet, have you?
Came up in my Zillow today.
Yeah?
Not that I know of.
You're building, you gotta get off that webpage.
I did, you're right. It's only gonna
Yeah,
cost
no
for
kidding,
us.
it's not good.
You gotta get off that. It's not- Trust me, I've been there. You do not wanna look at that anymore. It's like adopting a dog and still going to the adoption page. No, you'll end up with 4 dogs. So we had some conversation, and I looked at what some other towns have done, and Jack is not leaving for any reason other than his own personal lifestyle, I guess is a good way to say it. You have family up in York, Maine. I believe your wife's mother and dad are there,
Yep.
and her brother, or is it your brother?
Her brother.
Her brother.
Yep.
And so we're going to be very sad to see you leave.
I appreciate that.
Very sad, but we need to think now in terms of how we transition this, and Jack's been terrific in thinking through how we might do that. And one of the things I'd hoped, and he's agreed, is that he would certainly stay through our town meeting in November. So we were kicking around ways, and it was probably more at my request, because he has the right contractually to stay through June if he wanted to do so. But that would make it a very awkward transition over time for us. So he's come up with this proposal.
Yeah, this is a really rough draft. I need Todd's magical words to clean this up a little bit.
In looking at other situations where they're not leaving for other towns, Jack, you'd be unemployed when you get up there, right, I guess? For at least for a while.
Could be.
Yeah, you
That's what
never
I'm trying to prevent being unemployed when I get up there.
But you're not leaving for a job, is my
I'm not.
point. And so other towns where people have made lifestyle decisions, towns have found ways to create sort of a severance arrangement to help them make that transition. And it advantages the town because they can begin the search process in a sooner process, so that there's less time between the time Jack leaves versus the time when a new town administrator might start. Because if we can overlap those 2 timeframes, we're better served. And then we don't get into a position of having to hire an interim for an extended period of time, which is what happened when Jack took over. Jack was our finance director, and Markle left suddenly, if you will.
He left with about a month's
I
notice.
think you were interim for a good 6 months.
I was interim from the end of January until July 28th. After a worldwide search, you hired me
6
as
months.
the town administrator.
Worldwide. So we don't have to decide on this, or we can decide on this, or you can, I guess what I'd like is a little feeling on how you feel conceptually about this. Jeff, let me start with you.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense, I guess.
Now it's gone.
No, but you're our expert in the room.
I think it does make sense. And, knowing you, Jack, and knowing your concern for the town and the future of the town, I guess, question I would have, is during the 3-month period, can we reasonably depend on you to, help answer questions and, be a resource within reason, obviously. And I think that, that would make me 100% comfortable.
I'm happy putting language in there that kind of codifies that.
And I'm sure you will, Jack. I mean, I know you love this town.
Yeah,
I know that.
And I would, 3 years from now, I would answer, I would be available to the town as well, so.
I don't doubt it a bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's language in my contract that I kind of referenced, that I wanted to reference a little bit that talks about indemnification. There's always lawsuits going on, and if I get, pulled into one of our lawsuits, there's language in my current contract that would, even beyond the length of my contract, if I'm needed to be in court, et cetera, then the town would compensate me at a reasonable rate, and then cover litigation costs and all that stuff.
Okay.
But, so that protects me, but I would certainly, to your point, I'd be willing to put it in here that I'd be available for the town for consultation, through the 3-month period, but also even,
Ribbon cutting.
I'm coming down for ribbon cutting.
For sure.
Hopefully we'll cut that ribbon before you leave.
Yeah, so I mean, and I think I'm probably going to repeat some of the stuff that Jim said. So Liz and I made a decision to move up to Maine, and we lived up there back in the mid-'90s, so it's a place that we love very much. We both went to school at UNH. Our daughter's at UNH now, and as Jim said, Liz has family up there, who obviously I've known for, 40 years now. So, we made that decision, and so when I started talking about going back up there, we bought a house much quicker than we wanted to, or intended to. I tried to figure out how am I going to transition to get up there, and Jim, I think I got a little panicked because Jim started planning out how are you going to replace me, and literally I started panicking, and we bumped heads a little bit, my fault.
No fault.
So my intention here is, I don't want to leave the town, and say, all right, I got a job, I'm leaving in a month, goodbye. So I think this tells you that I'll be here for 3 months. In exchange for that, I would like some security on the backside for 3 months, so that I have the ability to it's difficult to find a job when you have a job, and so I may have to spend some time, full-time, looking for a job after I leave here. So it seemed like a reasonable solution.
And I'm just, as a point of reference, I did call up the MMA to ask them if they had any information on how, this is apparently quite common.
Yeah, I've only read about it in the newspapers, and I think I told you, I'm like, why do these people give severance packages to people that are leaving on their own accord? Well, it's because I don't want to, in my case, I don't want to leave you on 1 month's notice, nor do I.
Which Jack's contract allows. If he were to get a job January 1, and gave us notice December, well, think about it any way you so choose. He's only required by contract, and I don't think Jack would ever do that. But if he is contractually only required to give us 30 days' notice. So this eliminates that risk and provides us an opportunity to get a search going.
Yeah, I wanted you to be able to get
fairly quickly and minimize the amount of time, transition time, that we would be without a town administrator. So, Kevin, your thoughts?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I already spoke about it, yeah, absolutely, and Jack, yes, you will absolutely be missed. Ever since I've been involved in the town.
This is not listed as an action item, it's listed as a discussion item. So, if agreeable, I'll work with Jack to come up with a document, and we'll put it on the agenda as an action item for October 2nd. Is that agreeable?
Agreed.
Yep.
And get it out to you guys in advance, so you don't get it that day. Okay?
Fantastic.
And then, Jack, I want to thank you for your willingness to think through ways to make your life change that I know you're anxious to do, and in the same vein, provide the best consistency you possibly can for a town that I know you care deeply for.
I absolutely do. Absolutely do, and I appreciate all the nice comments received here tonight, and then also from other employees. I know it's going to be a very difficult time for me and Liz, but a lot of great people here. So.
Well, every call I've gotten has been one of disappointment.
Thank you.
So, all right, enough of that nostalgia. It's 11:15.
Congratulations, Kevin. The Yankees were able to pull off a stunning 3-2 victory. So,
there you go.
All right, so it's one less week you have to wear the hat.
Table that hat.
Yeah, October 2nd is going to be here, though.
I prefer a dirty hat as well, so it'll match my soul while I'm wearing it.
Maybe we should invite Cole back to that meeting. I have 2 hats. That was good. All right, any other business, gentlemen?
I think we've done quite enough business for one.
Okay.
Yeah, you're rivaling the planning board meetings when I used to be the chair.
Well, we
almost
used
as
to have
long.
selectmen's meetings that went up to midnight. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
If you're still with us, thank you very much. We appreciate it, and our next meeting will be October 2nd. Thank you very much, and have a safe evening. Christine, we have fallen asleep.